o'clock. This is when we start. This is a COPC meeting. We always start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me. All right, very good. So we've got a lot to cover tonight. We're going to try to keep this very crisp. And the first thing we always do is introduce our precinct chairs. We'll start with Precinct 1.
Christine Pratt, Precinct 1.
Precinct 2.
Precinct 2, Matt Tavares.
Precinct 3.
Dale Weber, Precinct 3, where it all began.
Precinct 4.
Precinct 4, Claire Montanari.
Precinct 5. Okay, we don't have Precinct 5 yet. Precinct 6.
Precinct 6, Bill Arienti.
Precinct 7.
Dave Golden, Precinct 7.
Precinct 8.
George McKay, Precinct 8.
Precinct 9, Catherine Holmes, that's me. Precinct 10.
Precinct 10, Alan Costello.
Precinct 11.
Precinct 11, Frank O'Brien.
Thank you, Frank. Precinct 12.
Precinct 12, Pat Adelman.
Precinct 13. She's sitting in for Sue Wentworth. Precinct 14.
Precinct 14, Tom Begley.
Welcome, Tom. Precinct 15.
Precinct 15, where it continues, Wrestling Brewster.
Precinct 16.
Precinct 16, Pompey Delafield.
Precinct 17.
Precinct 17, Joe Hutchinson.
Precinct 18.
Precinct 18, Carmen Lefrieri.
Very good.
Excuse me, Precinct 5. Excuse me, Precinct 5, Mr. Leary is on screen. Appreciate it, Mr. Leary, for being there.
Okay, so we have Kevin Lynch sitting in for Precinct 5.
No, I have Mike Leary right there sitting in for Precinct 5.
I'm here.
All right, very good. So we have Mike Leary for Precinct 5. Welcome, Mike. All right, so we will now move right into the agenda. And as I said, we've got an awful lot to cover. So what we're gonna do here is we're gonna keep these article reviews very crisp. We've got presenters for most of them. They'll talk about what the article is, and then we will open it up to questions. How we always function here is that the questions start with the committee of precinct chairs first, and then if we have town meeting members, then we will allow them to speak. And then if the public is here and has comments on any of the articles, then what we will do is we will pick up their comments in public comment. So let's start, and we'll proceed with Article 17, to amend the bylaw, Chapter 23, Article 1 for dog control. And we are joined tonight with lots of folks here. We've got our town clerk at the podium. I also want to say that we have Mr. Canty from the Select Board. We have Lee Hartman from the Planning Board. We have Steve Bulletin from the Planning Board, Planning Department. Planning Board, Steve Bulletin, and we have Mr. Brindisi, who's our town manager. So if you wouldn't mind, could you please just give us a brief overview of what this is and what's driving the need for the change?
Great, thank you. Thanks again for letting me come and be a part of this discussion. So I hope you had an opportunity to see what the old bylaw looks like and what I'm proposing for the new bylaw. And the major reason is for clarification purposes. Mass General Law Chapter 140 was passed several years ago, and many towns updated their bylaws to be to reflect the changes of Chapter 140. Oh, I'm sorry, I think it's 137 now that I'm saying that. So that being said, I wanted just more clarity in the dog control bylaw since I deal with all the dog licenses. So that was one reason, but the major reason, if you're not aware, there's a very good possibility that there's going to be a dog park in the town of Plymouth. And right now, the current dog control bylaw does not allow for unleashed dogs in the town of Plymouth. So we needed to make that exception. So as we were making that exception, I figured I'd clarify the whole dog bylaw at one time. And that being said, there is a section in here that states something to the effect of that there will be a dog park in the town of Plymouth, and the select board will make the rules and regulations concerning that dog park. So that way, if something is is made a regulation and then it's not working, it doesn't have to go back to town meeting to be approved. The select board can move forward and make that change.
Very good.
So it's very simple.
Very good. Does anyone have any questions for this article? Very good. I will tell you that what I'm finding is, and I think most town meeting members will appreciate this, that oftentimes we don't have the opportunity to ask questions when we're at town meeting. There are so many people that tend to want to speak at articles, and we run out of time. So these meetings that are the COPC is running for presentation forums, as well as our caucuses that are all scheduled, are becoming more and more critical. It gives town meeting members the opportunity to ask those questions, what they may not have when they go to the floor of town meeting. So I am covering the things that I think may bring questions, and so some of them may have no comments from the chairs, and that's fine because we sent out this documentation prior to the meeting. Some of them will probably go into much deeper. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we're moving right on to Article 14, Accessory Dwelling Units. This is to amend a zoning bylaw. Mr. Bolton, welcome.
Good evening, everyone. Steve Bolton, Precinct 15 and Vice Chair of the Planning Board. The article before you is to create by right accessory dwelling units. This has been before town meeting twice before. We're hoping third time's the charm. It's something that has been in our master plan for over 20 years now, without the success of making it pass. We're trying to explain a little better this time what exactly this is all about. So an accessory dwelling unit is similar to a family suite or an in-law suite, as they're called. The difference being that where an in-law suite must have a common entrance, by definition, an accessory dwelling unit has its own independent entrance. That's the difference. Family in-law suites also have shared living spaces. Accessory dwelling units are self-contained. That doesn't mean they can't overlap, but by definition, the way the regulations read, you at least can have an independent unit. Little comparison, so we already allow in-law apartments in all residential zoned areas, as of right. You can put in an in-law apartment. Those can be up to 1,200 square feet. Accessory dwelling units, as proposed, are up to 900 square feet, so smaller. The occupancy is limited in the in-law apartments, whereas it would not be limited in accessory dwelling units. However, accessory dwelling units, by our regulations, would not be allowed for short-term rental. No Verbo, Airbnb, anything like that. Additionally, either the accessory dwelling unit or the principal residence must be owner-occupied. So you're not going to have masses of rentals coming in. It's going to be one, has to be owner-occupied. That's an important issue because what it means is you don't end up with the concern that someone is going to let it just go to seed because they're physically living there. The owner is physically living there. If they're living in the ADU or if they're living in the primary residence, they're not going to let the other go hog wild, as it were. There are basic requirements for ADUs that simply go to all other zoning. In other words, you can't bypass zoning. You still need the same setbacks. You still need the same frontage requirements. You still need the parking. You still have to meet all of the sanitary code requirements. It doesn't change anything. If you don't meet those requirements, you can't build an ADU other than by trying to go via a special permit. The reason that we did this is because we heard from the residents. And I can go through statistics and all of that, but let me just give you two examples of the people who came before the planning board to talk about this. One person came to say that her mother needs to be able to live in town. She needs to bring her mother here. She can't do it in her own home. She simply can't. And an in-law suite just doesn't work in her physical, it's just not practical. She needs to be able to do an ADU. But she can't do it without, the cost of trying to do this by going the special permit route is prohibitive. It means architectural plans, engineering plans, additional things, going to the planning board, making the presentation, hiring a lawyer often to do that, then doing it all again for the Zoning Board of Appeals, only to risk the possibility that they don't get the approval. She needs to be able to do this for her mother. And actually, our original, if you look at the state draft of the ADU bylaw, so the state is proposing that every town throughout Massachusetts adopt this as a matter of right. We actually were a little bit more restrictive in some ways and a little bit more generous in others. The state's draft says it's supposed to be 900 square feet or 50% of the floor plan of the primary dwelling unit. We said, you know what, if there's going to be 900 square feet, let's make it 900 square feet, because people came to us and said, I want to do this, but I can't do it in 700 square feet. If I need to make this handicap accessible, the turnarounds, the doors, we just can't do it. So we said, okay, let's do this to help the residents who need help. That was the first resident who came before us. The next resident who came before us said, my daughter is a school teacher here in Plymouth. She's got a good job. She's come back from college. She's doing very, very well. She can't find an apartment that she can afford. I have her living in my house now, but she's an adult. She wants to live in her own space, but she can't afford to live in the Pine Hills or in Cordage or in Red Brook or at the Oasis. They're all too expensive. We're building very expensive apartments in this town. She wants to build a small space that she can give to her daughter to be independent, that first step to move on as an adult. This was the way that she could do this. These were the types of things we were looking for. This is not affordable housing with a capital A the way the state defines it. This is more affordable housing the way the residents of Plymouth have asked us to try and create. Try and create opportunities, housing that works intergenerationally. If I'm a senior, I can have a caregiver live and yet still not be in my home. If I need to generate some additional rent income, I can do that. If I want to move into the ADU and let my children come back to Plymouth and live in the house with their family and take over the taxes for me and eventually take over the residence and become the next generation of Plymouthians, I can do that. So these were the options and opportunities that we were trying to create for the residents of Plymouth. Now, I'm just going to have one of them because I know Ms. Holmes received an email from a resident of Precinct 16 who indicated that they wanted to oppose building these ADUs in the rural residential area absent septic. We considered the septic requirement and we considered restricting where these could be built. And we decided against it, particularly with respect to rural residential. Because what ends up happening if we do this is people who can't afford to live in their homes ultimately sell their home. If I can't continue to stay and I can't build an ADU to make it affordable for myself, I sell my home. Well, if I have a small home sitting on a nice large lot in the rural residential area, what's happening here in Plymouth? Those small homes aren't staying. They're getting torn down, and large homes are being built. So would we rather add a 900 square foot ADU fully compliant with our zoning, or would we rather have the house torn down and have a 5,500 square foot mansion built, putting greater strain on our infrastructure, greater strain on our roads, greater strain on our services, and further pricing the residents out of Plymouth? So that's why we chose to do this as open to all, to be compatible. And just very quickly on top, we've looked at other towns that have done this. If they have seen, the most we have seen in a single year is 20. Basically what happens, and that was at the very beginning, and then they tail off. People who have an immediate need and can afford it, this is still not an inexpensive process, do it immediately, and then it tails off. Most of the towns who built these with restrictions are removing the restrictions because they want more of them built and they're not getting enough of them built. So with that, thank you very much and happy to answer any questions.
Very good. I'm going to open it up to the chairs for questions. I see Mr. Costello, Mr. Golden, Ms. don't know who you're pointing at. Wrestling? Yes, okay, very good. I need someone to keep track for me. This is, so I've got Mr. Costello, Mr. Golden, Mr. Brewster, Pompey, Mr. Carmen, Bill, George, clear?
How about we start with like the first three?
Good.
Because I can't.
Just quickly to our committee, is this the complete backup material for this whole article? What we were given for tonight's package?
I don't know what you're looking at.
We're sent out.
So,
we're sent
right,
out
so we
for-
don't, just so for the people at home, we don't have our books yet. So what we tried to do is send soft copies of the material. So all the soft copy of the book was emailed to everybody, the special
Does
and,
it say 900 square feet? Am I missing it? Okay, so the major question I have,
so Alan, I would direct you to the email that was sent that actually has the whole book that was sent out for the spring and the special until we get our books. And I think there might be maybe a.
I just printed it in entirety, what I was sent. All right. All right, very good. It was not going to influence my questions. The biggest question I have, the biggest problem I have with this whole thing, and you touched on it, was if the resident decides to put in an ADU, decides to move into the ADU, what are the restrictions for renting out the primary house? Is it only family? I mean,
No.
Okay,
No,
so
there's
when
no
a
restriction on
family,
that.
a young family moves in there with 2 or 3 children, they're going to attend school at $20,000 a year per student. How is that going to be a benefit for the town? We're upside down, 60 grand, and that's a very easy possibility. So how do you prevent that?
You can't prevent it, but if the senior leaves, then they're selling the house to that family with 2 or 3 kids. It's
Fair
the
enough,
same.
but the senior's getting a second bite at the town is on the hook again for 3 more children in that residence. And it's just not, it doesn't make an ounce of sense. There's no prohibition. Now, the example you had of the teacher, the school teacher, she does really well for a few years, she meets someone, she gets married, has a family, moves out. What are the prohibitions for the next person moving in there? Could be just anyone off the street, right?
Yes, it's a rental unit, just like anything else.
And what about parking and the enforcement of parking if these do take off and they start to impact the parking in certain neighborhoods?
They must meet the parking requirements for the neighborhood. So if there's an off-street parking requirement, there's an off-street parking requirement. They don't allow additional parking differently.
Someone's going to monitor that and enforce that.
That's in fact one of the advantages of doing the ADUs, because we at least know where they are, as opposed to all of the illegal apartments that we have in Plymouth. If you actually do this as a bylaw, people will come, they will come, get it permitted, build it, so that it's at least documented, because they're doing it as a matter of right rather than illegally, and we will then at least know. We'll have a list, we'll be able to monitor that. Our code enforcement people can do it. Right now, we're guessing as to where these illegal apartments are. Legalize it, make it known so that we can actually ensure that these things are on appropriate septic and sewer. Make sure that they are following the parking requirements, because when someone comes to the planning board, to the planning department and ask the question, they'll be given the guidelines. And when they go to the building department to get a permit, they'll be told whether or not they comply or not, and we'll know.
Okay, one final question. You touched on it as well. How many cities and towns in the state, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, have an ADU bylaw presently at this time?
It's hard to say because some of them have restrictions versus others. All 15 towns on the Cape have it. 31 communities in western Massachusetts have it. Another, at least dozen in the greater Boston area. It's not...
So 20%?
That would be a
Plus
rough
or minus?
guess. Rough guess, yes.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Golden.
Thank you, Catherine. Mr. Bolton, thank you for being here tonight. Steve, I have a 7,400 square foot lot in Manomet, as many folks down in that beach community do. I've already maximized the space that my home takes up on the lot. Am I going to be able to do this?
No.
Thank you. If someone has a restriction on the number of bedrooms because they were granted a local upgrade, and they have a 2-bedroom restriction, and they already have 2 bedrooms in their primary home, will they be able to do this?
No.
Thank you. I'm hearing a lot of folks saying that this will double the number of housing units in town. Can you address that?
As I said, the one community that we've been able to find, their highest number was 58 units over 3 years. And after that, they've started to tail off since then. So, no, these are not this is not an inexpensive process for somebody to do still. We're making it less expensive, but it's not inexpensive. Again, this still has to meet all of the code requirements. It still has to meet all the septic requirements. People are doing this when they're doing it principally for family reasons. It can be as an income generator, and we're hoping for some instances that actually is the case. We're hoping that seniors can go ahead and do this to generate income so that they can afford to stay in the homes that they can no longer afford to stay in just based on their Social Security pension and trying to fight the tax expense. And wherever these things are built, and I know that there is a huge demand when people come to town, they ask for the in-law apartments, ADUs, anything they can. Real estate property values increase. They don't go down. They increase.
Thank you. My last question is, can you address the taxability of accessory dwelling units?
They constitute an improvement to real estate, and properties are assessed accordingly, and they are taxed accordingly.
At the full and fair cash value?
Absolutely, which is, again, one of the advantages of doing this as an ADU, because, again, we'll know where they are and actually be able to tax them appropriately, versus the illegal apartments where we don't know where they are.
Thank you.
Mr. Brewster.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Two-part question. First part, can you talk about the communities that have done this and just elaborate on how it's gone? And you know, I think the scare is that we're going to have a mass amount of people doing this, and that it's going to create chaos and parking and dwelling. Can you talk a little bit about, you know, the other communities that have done this? And then can you talk about what's different about this from the other 2 times that this has come before us?
With respect to the other communities, and I have not spoken to all 60-some-odd communities that have done this, but I can tell you, for example, when you look at communities like Salem, Lexington, Concord, Newton, again, communities with long histories, some of them with small lots, historical areas, et cetera, and some of them being quite affluent communities, they're still not seeing huge numbers of these. But where they have seen them, they're very, very happy with them. I have not spoken to any community, including all the communities on the Cape. Some of the communities on the Cape originally placed additional restrictions. Some of them made them purely in-law, family apartments, et cetera. They're removing those restrictions because they have been successful and they want to see more of these because housing has become unaffordable. So I have yet to find anyone who has said this has been an unmitigated disaster and we want to rescind it. It's not happening. They are all trying to expand these. With respect to your second question, which was how do we...
What's different?
What's different? How do we...
I need to go to my constituents and tell them, you know, this has come before town meeting 3 times, and this is the 3rd time. What's the difference, and why should I vote for it?
I'll let Mr. Hartman start that answer.
Thank you.
Lee Hartman, Director of Planning and Development for the town. So the big difference is the previous 2 proposals had a special permit provision in it. So to Mr. Golden's point, if he came in for one of these before and he maybe needed to get 5 feet closer to the lot line, we had a provision in there that would allow the Zoning Board of Appeals to allow that. This has changed now so that it's allowed by right. If you don't comply with the laws, you can't do it.
Pompey Delafield.
Yeah, I'd like to follow up on what the resident had asked in his questioning, so I'd like to read it and get your response to it.
Sure.
It said, I am doing this because I have seen what is happening on Cape Cod, where their ponds and aquifers are rapidly losing ground to eutrophication and facing certain doom. It has become a real crisis. The problem is that Title V septic systems do not remove nitrogen and phosphorus, and it goes straight through the sand into the water. The dire situation on the Cape will surely soon follow by the same in Plymouth, with its 300 ponds will be threatened. Wastewater treatment plant does remove nitrogen, and so therefore it would be all right in those situations. Can you address that situation of the potential of that to our ponds?
Certainly. Well, once again, the requirement being that any one of these ADUs still must meet all of the health and safety requirements. In fact, the Board of Health endorsed this particular proposal for that reason. One of the things that we have seen, again, in the past, for example, though, is homes that have failing septic systems can still be transferred intergenerationally. If you transfer a home from one family member to another family member, they don't have to upgrade. If you build an ADU, they're going to be out there and making sure that you're in compliance. So, again, by regulating something that people are already doing illegally, we are making ourselves better prepared to address the problems. So, again, hypothetically, as you say, and we still have the issue, if someone sells the property and builds a much larger home, yes, they'll put in a new septic system to meet those requirements, but now it's more sewage.
Mr. Bulletin, I think that Mr. Delafield was saying, though, that any septic system that has Title V, regardless of whether it's failing or not, doesn't filter the nitrogen, the nitrates. So that's what's going through the sand and polluting the water. I think that's what he's looking for you to clarify.
Exactly. That's
Well, no. First of all, there are systems that do that. We do have nitrogen-reducing systems. Those are the ones that are now being mandated on the Cape and on the South Coast. We are probably in Plymouth, I'm told, about 10 years away from being told that we are going to have to do that with every one of our septic systems as well. I've heard numbers subsidized at $50,000, unsubsidized a lot more, and we only have a guess as to what will be when it's time for us and when the new systems come online, because they're always going to be more expensive and they're going to be more expensive to maintain. That being said, again, we're not putting a greater strain on anything. What we're doing is we're making sure that what we have is done legally. So again, if your concern is to say, I'm against any septic systems, period, then that's fine. I understand that, and I can understand that sentiment, and I wish we could put every resident on town sewer or a private sewer system. I don't think we have the billions of dollars to pay for that. So we have to deal with what the state legally allows right now. What the state allows is they allow Title V compliant septic systems. We are looking to make sure that with respect to any new building in Plymouth, any new building, whether that's a new home or an ADU, that it complies fully with Title V. And that will mean that some antiquated septic systems will get upgraded. That's a benefit rather than a detriment to the town.
Okay. We've got an awful lot of questions. Did you have a follow-up? Carmen, go right ahead.
Yes, thanks for coming and explaining what you have so far. I'm not too clear on the whole process here or the point that you're trying to make. I understand 900 square feet, is that the maximum? And
yes.
You also said 50% of the existing dwelling. Can
you
tell me a little
that
bit
was a requirement. That was something that the state had put in.
Okay.
It was either 900 square feet or 50% of the principal residence, whichever was less.
So, okay.
We decided to say, no, it's just up to it doesn't have to be 900 square feet. You can build one that's 500 square feet, 700 square feet, whatever fits on your lot. If you're going to put something on your lot, you still have to make sure you meet the setback requirements. Right. If all you can fit is 700 square feet, that's what you build.
Okay, thank you. Some of the other points that were raised were regarding septic systems, schools, life safety, and other infrastructure within the town of additional people, additional children, and so on and so forth. Has that been identified, and has that been thought about, how we're going to build up these other systems to support these additional residents?
Well, we'll start with, again, the fact that what you're talking about is nothing more than 900 square feet. No one is moving into ADUs with families. It's just not, I've checked with other towns, they don't see an influx of families. What you see is you see single people, you see a family, you see somebody renting to someone who is a single individual, maybe a young couple. But these are small residences. These don't even fit within the standard definition of a tiny home as you've seen them on TV. These are smaller than those. So people aren't moving families into them.
Okay. Well, I've experienced different situations, more people in the same size units, especially different cultures, what have you. So you're saying this, you're supposing this, but is there any limitations that will say only 2 people or so many people per square feet?
No. Again,
so we could have 5 or 6 people in a 900 square foot place.
As much as you can have one in any apartment built in the Commonwealth, yes.
Okay.
The law and fair housing laws would actually restrict you from doing that. Unless you're making something an age-restricted unit, you can't not rent to somebody because of children. In fact, that's a violation of the Fair Housing Act.
But you could put in a motion to say it has to be 2 people, right?
No, you can't. That violates the law.
You cannot limit the amount of people in a certain square
If
footage.
you have 2 people with a child who come in and you say, no, I'm sorry, it's only 2 people, you would be fined. You would be violating state and federal law.
So one more question. So a married couple moves in and gets pregnant, they have to be evicted?
No, they can't be. Cannot
Okay.
be.
Okay, so when it happens again, they have...
The law says very specifically, that is discrimination. We cannot do that.
Right. So we could have quite a few people in that home. Thank you.
Mr. Orienti?
Thank you, Catherine. First, I want to say that I personally think it's a good idea and that we should be moving forward with it. I do have some reservations. First and foremost is around the pond areas with the septic, as Poppy was saying. Right now, you may have a small house. Used to maybe have been a cottage at one time. Now it's a year-round house with a 2-bedroom septic system. You put this on, now they have to put a whole new septic system in, or do they have to just put a second septic system in specifically just for this unit?
They have to put in a septic system that complies with the Board of Health requirements, whether that is upgrading the entirety of the septic system or adding a singular septic system for just this unit, either one. But you would need to make sure that everything complied with Title V.
And do we have any restrictions on how far they can be, how close they can be to a pond?
Yes, it's the same as any other home, that you cannot have a septic system within certain distances. You can't violate conservation restrictions. You have to be well behind your setbacks. All of the same requirements apply. This is nothing more than the equivalent of adding some, it's the same as if you added a back bedroom to an existing home, something that you could do as a matter of right in a lot of places. You're just doing with a separate entranceway.
Okay. The third one is will this unit be taxed as an improvement to an existing property? Would it be taxed as a separate standalone property? Would it have would you get one bill, one tax bill for the whole property, or would that be subject to a second tax bill on its own?
It would be part of the existing building. These are not something that is treated as a separate property. It can't convey separately. It is part of that house, which is, again, one of the restrictions, because it ultimately has to be that either the ADU or the residence must be owner-occupied. You'll never be able to split these. That's, again, something that happens all the time where we've seen, somebody has built a house and then they build an outbuilding and then they say, oh, well, later we're just converting this into a family thing. And then a few years later, what happens? Well, they divide the lot and they go ahead and say, oh, now it's a separate lot because we can do this because we have enough land. You cannot do this with ADUs.
Okay, and finally, when you were talking about the residency, how do we enforce the residency?
It's a restriction on the, it's a restriction when it's put in. So it would literally go with the deed. You would have to be filing this as part of your deed. It would be recorded to say that there's an ADU on the property. And that's how we document it. And that way, if it turns out that someone sells this, it's got to be clear that somebody must be living there.
So how do we know if someone's not using it as an Airbnb or something like that?
Enforcement is always a challenge when it comes to Airbnbs. We have, if you look at the list of Airbnbs that are officially registered in this town versus the list of apartments you'll see available during our on-season, you'll never be able to go ahead and find that. You will always have this challenge when it comes to enforcement, no matter what we do. Again, the better chance we have of enforcing these things is by knowing that they're there and at least making sure they're done properly, and we can at least do something to monitor them. If we don't know it's there, we'll never be able to figure it out. So I know that people are concerned and saying, oh, we're allowing something that's going to create more. These are being built whether we like it or not. We're now just trying to say, make it legal so we know that you're doing this and doing it properly. That's the biggest problem we're facing.
What happens if someone violates it, not just once, but a couple of times? You have to go back more and more because a neighbor's calling up saying they're doing this.
We can go ahead and actually, the building department can actually go ahead and rescind the certificate of occupancy. You can really hurt somebody pretty significantly if they've gone ahead and spent $100,000+ and they're now told you cannot legally occupy this because you're violating the law. That's a pretty big stick.
I would rather see it for the whole occupancy rather than the ADU, because if they're going to violate it and they're going to continue to violate it, they're doing it knowingly and willingly, and therefore they should be really hit with a big stick.
I appreciate that. Unfortunately, we're not able to subsequently, we can't retroactively rescind the certificate of occupancy for a lawfully occupied house.
We're going to move on. Pat Alderman? Pat, you're muted.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. You talk about affordability and a family member who couldn't afford Red Brook or Pine Hills or the Oasis. What is to prevent astronomical rents for these ADUs? Thank you.
Well, there's nothing to prevent that. They're market rate rents. So the issue is you don't end up with these types of amenities and other restrictions and sizes that we have in these other units that justify these large rents. Most people who are doing this, yes, to either help a family member or to generate some income. The goal is that we allow these smaller units to be created in areas that are not immediately being used for seasonal rentals where there's huge money to be made. We're basically saying, here's an opportunity to create something that's going to either help you as the homeowner live in it, or a family member, or rent something out so that you can generate enough income that you can continue to stay there. Yes, I imagine that there will probably be instances in which someone puts in an ADU and is able to get a $2,500 a month rent. They're probably limited because, again, it's 900 square feet, and not a lot of people want to pay $2,500 a month for 900 square feet with absolutely no amenities other than what's physically there in your unit. But it's always a possibility. But it's the exception, not the rule.
Very good. Matt Tavares, and then Mr. Golden.
So I just wanted to kind of jump in off of the direction that this is going, but picked up on something that you said earlier, where you mentioned, and I agree with this, that smaller homes are kind of going by the wayside in Plymouth, and they're being bought up, and larger footprint homes are being put onto these lots. You did, though, mention that, that there were a number that were because they didn't have ADUs. So what's the move-out rate in Plymouth right now, if that's the case?
I can't answer that question based upon it.
So then that was just a conjecture.
Oh, no.
I want to make sure, because it seemed like an argument.
Well, it's not it's not a conjecture in the sense that we have been told by people, I'm leaving, I can't afford to stay, and I need to bring something in, and I can't do it. I've had people say that, so that's not a conjecture.
Okay.
I can't tell you.
Some people,
some
5,
people have
10, 100. I don't know. I like facts. I like numbers. I'm the numbers guy. I like to sit down. I just wanted to know that. But the other piece to this, so just so I understand this, and I may have missed this because there was a whole lot of people asking questions, and I was trying to keep track of them. When that was a great example that you gave about the teacher, and totally fully understand that. Then they may say they move into call it the main building on the property. If they decide, okay, I'm moving out, don't want mom or mom-in-law or dad-in-law in the back, they move out. When you say that the dwellings need to be owner-occupied, it needs to be within the dwelling so they could then rent out the front piece property?
Either way.
Either way.
Either you live in the main, either the owner lives in the main house or they live in the ADU.
Perfect.
It can go both ways.
All right, yeah, I just wanted to be clear on that.
With respect to your other question, and again, I don't have the specific numbers, but I would point you to the Senior Task Force Needs Survey that just came back from UMass Gerontology, in which a lot of our seniors indicated, in fact, it was something like 35% of the respondents indicated that they were unable to afford to maintain their current homes and pay their taxes.
In Plymouth?
In Plymouth.
Yep.
No, it's the Plymouth Needs Study, so I would definitely direct you there.
That's fine. It seemed like you were going a different direction, though, with your argument, so that's why I wanted to know. And when I hear people have told me that...
It's a trigger. It's a trigger for us all.
Great, but
it really
don't take it personally.
No, it's an understandable one. And again, I give you examples of the people who came before the planning board to tell us that these were their issues. Sure. Again, but that's not to say that our seniors have made it very clear in the survey that they are financially strapped and they are not able to afford to maintain their home, and that this is one of the options that they would like to have.
And I understand and I appreciate that. I fully understand that the Plymouth community is aging and that, we're looking at a lot of fixed incomes and, our current residents and our longtime residents are being more or less, call it, priced out. So I understand that.
Okay, so before I call on Mr. Golden, I want to just jump in here because I haven't talked yet. And when we look at this article that's come before us before, I think another difference is, if I remember correctly, Mr. Hartman, I think you can, there was a restriction that the owner had to, I believe, live in the ADU, right? In the first iteration of the article, there was a restriction as to where I thought they were allowed to live. Now it's, okay, so it was never that way? Okay, well, that's good to know. And then going back to your point on the survey for seniors, I would remind the committee and all the town meeting members of the presentation that Michelle Brady came before us and gave us on how many of our seniors are actually still caring for their children. Do you remember that? So I think there is probably a need here. When I think it was, I want to say something like 40 or 50%, I'll have to pull up the presentation, of our seniors in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s still caring for disabled children or elderly parents. And I don't know about you, my dad's not listening tonight, so I can say this, I don't want to live with my dad. I don't want to live with him. And I know that there is an enormous amount of parents that are sitting in Plymouth, because I've talked to them and they've called me, and their children have autism. And we in Plymouth face a lot of children that have autism. And many of them are not ever going to be able to live outside of their homes. And their parents are never going to be able to stop caring for them, and because that cost is really, really high. So when you went and did your research on this, did you hear from those types of parents? Because I know I've heard from them in South Plymouth.
Michelle refers to them as the sandwich generation. People who are sandwiched between taking care of kids, including kids with special needs, and taking care of their parents. And they're flat out. They have no ability to manage all of this. Part of it that becomes a benefit, again, when we talk about this is, yes, you can create a separate living space and still have a special needs child there on the property, but close enough. The same with a parent. And the same vice versa. Imagine if your parent just wants to keep living in their home, but they need a home aide or somebody there, and they don't have the space to do it in their own home, or they're worried about the security of their own home. You have an independent space. You're still in control of your own home, and an independent space with someone who, if you need the assistance, is available. Just a neighbor, just somebody to look out for you. There are all sorts of scenarios, and again, some of them are hypothetical, some of them are actual. The purpose of doing this is to create greater flexibility in our housing. And again, I understand people say, oh, it's going to be a boom, it's going to be. That's the speculation and the hypothetical that you're getting. That's the I've heard that it's really bad. Because I've asked, and no one has told me from any of these towns, oh, we're getting an influx and we're getting a flood. And when I start hearing things like, well, different cultures come in with many different types of people, that's
Okay.
triggers my ear.
We're going to move on. Mr. Golden.
Thanks, Catherine. I have a point of clarification and then another question, Steve. Mr. Arianti made gave a very important question about whether or not these could be used for short-term rentals. I think it's important to note that in order to be on VRBO or on Airbnb or any of the major mainstream short-term rental websites, you have to register with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. You cannot do so until you have a license number from the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth then reports it to the Department of Public Health, who can then do the follow-up. So these can't become short-term rental. My question, Steve, is if a property has an approved ADU, will it preclude either the main dwelling or the ADU from being a short-term rental at any point in time?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Tavares, do you have a question?
One quick clarification question. As far as the main dwelling and then the accessory dwelling unit, I know you have language in there about like can't be more than 8 feet or something. What was are they still restricted to the same lot line restrictions? Okay.
Absolutely, yes.
All right, thank you. Sorry. Thanks.
Very good. Okay, we're going to move on. I will say that there is going to be some motions on this article, motions to amend. I know those are coming. As soon as I find out what those are, I will be sharing those with the committee and with town meeting members. But before, I forget, we have so many people in the audience tonight. Are there any town meeting members that have any questions on this? Mr. Cirque.
Rich Cirque, Precinct 2. I think this is a fine idea, and I hope the town meeting passes it. I want to add something to what Mr. Bolton said about the number of illegal apartments that currently exist. This will force those illegal apartments sooner or later to come into compliance with the requirements of this bylaw. Right now, the illegal apartments that exist are without the benefit of inspections and are without the benefit of a building permit. If this bylaw passes, there will be inspections and there will be a building permit required. And as a practical matter, these second dwelling units often come to the forefront at the time of a refinance or a sale. At that time, a buyer will come into the property, and before he closes, hopefully, he'll investigate whether that secondary dwelling unit is legal. And if it isn't, something's going to have to be done either to cease the use of that unit or hopefully to make it comply. So for those practical reasons, I hope this passes.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Cirque. We're moving on. We're now going to be discussing Article 18, MBTA communities.
Excuse me. Hello. I don't know how to go and raise my hand. Could I ask some questions?
Mr. Lynch, If you go to the bottom of your screen,
Right.
there is a button.
What button?
Never mind. Please just ask your question.
Okay, this is more for Lee Hartman, please.
Yep. Go right ahead, Mr. Lynch.
Okay.
Ask your question.
Mr. Hartman. Hello? I can't see him. I'm sorry. Okay, Mr. Hartman, how many in-law apartments are currently in Plymouth, Massachusetts?
So it's hard to know for sure, but when we look with the...
No, you said on video. How
Mr.
many,
Lynch,
please?
Mr. Lynch, we don't talk to speakers or people.
I
we
appreciate
don't-
that,
we
but
don't
I
talk
just
to
want
people like
to
that
cut right to
at
the
this
chase.
committee.
Thank you.
I,
How many?
So again, I'm not going to say definitively exactly what it is. We have different databases over the years that have recorded what we used to call an in-law apartment. Now we call it a family suite. But according to the best guess we have, it's about 540 of those in-law apartments in Plymouth today.
Okay, that is different. Thank you, sir. That is different from what you said. The planning board is 580. Next, how many of the in-law apartments are currently being used as they were applied for, in other words, as in-law apartments?
We have no way to know. So when you have an in-law apartment, you have an affidavit that's on record that says that you're going to make this available to a
Thank you,
relative.
sir. Moving on to the next question.
Mr. Lynch,
if you
we
would.
do not talk to
I'm
people
just
in our
asking because
community
I have
like
very
that.
limited amount
So
of
we're
time.
We're gonna
I
move
realize
on.
that. Thank
we're
you.
Moving on. We're
Okay.
We're moving on to Article 18, MBTA Community Voting Zoning Bylaw Change.
So I'm going to, again, Lee Hartman, Director of Planning and Development, go out on a limb here because of your night and do this one in the 2-minute version. So let me go right through this. This is Article 18. What this is it seeks to bring Plymouth into compliance with the state's Housing Choice Act, which we also know and have heard is they call it the MBTA Communities Law. Compliance with this law is mandatory. The state is not saying we have an option. They say we must comply with this law. What does it mean for Plymouth? What it means for Plymouth, according to what the state has mandated for us, is that we have to build, it's called zoned capacity. I'll talk a little bit about that. For 2,807 multifamily development units in Plymouth. Zone capacity, it doesn't mean a single unit has to be built. It just says you need to zone for 2,807 multifamily units at a density of 15 units per acre or more. So if we do not comply with this bylaw, we will be ineligible for several major grants that the town has been very active with applying for. About a dozen other grants we'll lose competitiveness with. And as we've seen in towns like Milton, we'll face legal challenges too. And I would point out that over the last 5 years, we've had about $10 million in those grants that have come to the town. And again, the other part of this is the legal challenge too. So what we have done is we had the Barrett Planning Group that had worked with us as a consultant. We had 2 public forums and a joint meeting with the Select Board and the Planning Board to ask the community what should we do. And we gave them several options for how we could comply. Some that could make significant additional development into town and others that would minimize it. And the clear direction we had from the community is do the minimum necessary and take credit for all the multifamily development that we've already seen out there in the community. So with that, what we've done is we have created an overlay district and a bylaw, which you'll have in your packet, and we've placed this development in areas that either have been developed or have been already permitted for multifamily development. So that's Cordage Park. It's not where the existing commercial area is. It's where the back piece is by the water that's already approved for residential or where the apartments are already. It is at Colony Place where we have the Sawyer's Reach neighborhood and the Walk 40B already constructed. It's at the Pine Hills where, again, not the whole Pine Hills, only where you see the multifamily Avalon, the Mark, and Hanover, Brazzuto. And then it's at the Oasis at Home Depot Road where, again, already been built. So after we adopt this, we expect, because it's already been developed or approved to be developed, that not going to see any new additional development come from this. We're going to meet their compliance, and as I've said before, we're taking credit for the multifamily that's already has happened in this town. So again, this has been approved by Town Council, the Planning Board, Select Board, and the Advisory and Finance Committee. And we hope you support it too. And again, make it clear that I know once this is done, we're really just taking credit for the multifamily we have out there now. We'll be in compliance and minimize any eliminate risk for any kind of lawsuits against us, and also be eligible for those grants again.
Very good. So we're opening it up to questions. Mr. Arienti?
Thank you, Mr. Hartman. I appreciate your work on this. The fact that we do have these either being inbuilt or being built or existing, that it will satisfy our requirement for the most part.
Yeah, so we don't have to build, the law doesn't require a single unit to be built. It just says you have to zone for it. So we're going to zone over existing areas already. And again, as I said, take credit for it. So yeah,
Okay.
we believe we meet the model requirement and we meet the state's requirement to comply.
Okay. Personally, I think this is another blow to cities and towns by the state of Massachusetts and the city of Boston. Boston is getting rid of their affordable housing at a record rate, and they're pushing it to everybody else. Boston rents, for the most part, are what some people make for what they pay for a month. Some people make a year. And it's really a disgrace that the cities and towns throughout Massachusetts have to now just continually take in, while Boston gets a chance to just rake in the profits. And that's my word. I want to thank you for what you've already done.
Thank you, Mr. Arienti. Any questions online? Any questions in the audience? Very good. We're moving on. We're now going to be, thank you, Mr. Hartman. We're now moving on to Article 15, the expanding of the historic district. And I also want to make acknowledgement that Gail Butler from the Advisory and Finance Committee is online. Welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening. Appreciate you being here.
Hi, how you doing? Mike Tubin, the chairman of the Plymouth Historic District Commission. I'll run through it pretty quickly. There's just a couple of maps I want to at least make sure that. Oh, I got it. So the Plymouth Historic District Commission is proposing an expansion to the current historic district. This is a makeup of the committee. Local historic district protects historic structures from demolition and inappropriate alteration, retains unique character, preserves visual sense of the past, incorporates compatible new construction into a community, and over 120 cities and towns in Mass already have historic districts. Plymouth Historic District, established in 1973, expanded 3 times, 77, 91, and 95. Other areas of town have very little protection from alterations, demolitions, and incompatible development. The demolition delay bylaw was adopted in 2014, approved by the town meeting. It's triggered by the proposed demolition of a building 75 years or older, provides an opportunity to explore options for preserving historically significant buildings. After 12 months, there's no protection. And this is the current historic district. And this is the expansion in yellow, which would include 59 properties. It's basically, if you go down Water Street where the marina is, the building that's going to be soon demolished, it's from there down Union Street, up Lincoln Street, and all the properties contained within there, 59 total properties, and Bradford Street included. And the proposed expansion, it's a remarkably intact 19th century neighborhood adjacent to the historic district. Proximity to downtown and waterfront areas are at risk. It's a visual reminder of hardworking Plymouthians who engaged in shipping, fishing, and industry, especially on Bradford Street. Also includes municipal buildings on Lincoln Street that have served the community for over 100 years. The Plymouth High School, now Plymouth Public Schools, and Nathaniel Morton Building School. And the proposed expansion includes federally designated Bradford Union Historic District. The federal designation is just basically in name. It provides access to federal and local grants if they're available, maybe some tax breaks, but doesn't give any protection as far as historic preservation. So that's called the Bradford Union Street Historic District. It was named it was named on the National Register of Historic Places in 1983. It's identified for significant architecture, commerce, industry, and archaeologically. So they're not guaranteed protection from alterations and demolitions. The proposed expansion, this is what we've been through up till now. All property owners have been notified. Public forum on July 13th, the 25th, and we had a public hearing, which is required by law. And then we also sent out a resident survey, and we've retained a professional consultant to do a study, which is required by Mass Historic. So that was already submitted to Mass Historic and approved by Mass Historic. So the local historic district provides the most effective protection for historic properties and neighborhoods. The demolition delay, as I mentioned, only lasts 1 year. Then after that year, there's no protection. It can just be torn down. And the National Register of Historic Places doesn't have any historic preservation besides just in name. The expansion requires a 2/3 vote of town meeting. And the Historic District Commission will review projects according to published guidelines and can prohibit demolition, as opposed to the demolition delay. Just delaying it, we can actually stop demolition from happening. Abutters are notified of proposed projects, allowing for community participation in the review process. And what triggers a review, it's physical changes to the exterior of a building where visible from a public way. If it's the back of the house, we're not really as concerned. It's just more what is visible from a public way, streets and alleyways. Examples include additions, chimney caps, exterior lighting, fencing, garden, house sheds, mechanical and plumbing vents, paint, siding, signage, solar panels, swimming pools, windows, doors, screens, awnings, and shutters. What does not trigger a review is interior of the property, anything not visible from a public way. It does allow for routine maintenance. If there's some shingles that fell off a house and you want to repair the shingles, the existing siding, you're welcome to do that. Any type of repairs for maintenance does not fall under the Historic District Commission. And we also allow replacement of like for like. If somebody's going to paint their house white and it's already white, you don't need to come in. We'll do a certificate of non-applicability. There's 3 certificates we do: a certificate of appropriateness, certificate of non-applicability, and a certificate of hardship. And the non-applicability applies to somebody that's, they don't have to come in for a meeting if they're replacing like for like. The review process, actually I just jumped ahead to it, but the staff will schedule a hearing if necessary. If the formal hearing is required, applicant will bring necessary documents and plans to the hearing. The commission works collaboratively with applicants to find an amendable solution. Once approved, the proposed work can commence. We try not to operate combatively. We try to work with people to find a solution. If we can't allow what they're suggesting, we have architects, developers, builders, historians on the board, and we could try to offer alternatives and try to come up with an amendable solution, which we usually do. We did an expansion survey, and this was mailed out. 42 were mailed, 17 were returned, and you can see the results there. That was in September. So you can see people do recognize the historic significance of the area. Do the benefits outweigh the imposition of new restrictions? Property owners will benefit from protection of their neighborhood, adapt to change while also preserving unique character of the area, protect significant buildings from demolition and inappropriate alteration, incorporate new construction that is compatible with existing historic landscape. Districts maintain a positive standard benefit for both residents and visitors, stability, pride in the neighborhood, and peace of mind. Recent studies reveal that historic districts actually enhance property values. And that's the end of the the end of the presentation if anybody has any questions on that.
Thank you. I apologize. My dad called me, and he must have heard my comment. But I have to pick. So I apologize for stepping out. We are going to open it up to questions.
He didn't comment about this, did he?
No. Ms. Adelman.
Thank you. I really support this expansion of the historic district. But I have a question about the 12-month demolition delay. Does that only apply to buildings in the historic district, or is it townwide?
That's townwide.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Very good. We're going to move on.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome to stay, or if you're like me, you'll be having a glass of wine. Article 19, we're going to amend NGBL Chapter 90, Section E, Preservation of Historically Significant Buildings. Mike, is that you too, or did you cover that? Where's Mike? I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Yeah, so we kind of forget about this one because it's really more of a housekeeping article. So right now, the demolition delay bylaw has a 15-day notice that somebody says, I have a building, I want to demolish it, and the way the bylaw is written now, the commission has 15 days to decide whether or not to hold a public hearing. So what we're finding, especially with a committee that meets every other week, every 2 weeks, that timeline is almost impossible to hit. So what it forces to do is either forces the commission to make a decision without really thinking about it, which isn't really in the best interest of the property owner too. So we just want to extend it by 1 more week. So it's 21 days. So somebody files, 21 days for the committee to look at that and say, you know what, you can demolish it, it's not historically significant, or they say, it might be historically significant, we want to hold a public hearing and do additional review. So it's just a week extra to be added to that initial decision-making period.
Very good. All right, thank you. Any questions? Okay, seeing none, we're going to move on. Article 16. There is a lot of them. So Mr. Cohan, he's got some support with him for different people that are going to speak to some of these articles. We're going to breeze through these. We're going to start with 16A.
16A, see if we can turn this on.
Look at Mr. Cohen. He's getting good with this. Very good.
Okay, Bill Cohen with the Community Preservation Committee. I just wanted to draw your attention to a document that was passed out tonight. The CPA briefing book just came back from the printer. We will be putting this in the mail later this week to all town meeting members. Obviously, the charter does call for getting all supporting docs to the committee within 14 days of town meeting. But what the committee has noticed is that with 18 precincts and many caucuses and in different precincts considering having more than one meeting to cover articles for town meeting, we're finding the need to get this into production as soon as possible and get it out to you. So you have it now. I can walk you through it. I'm sure after you have time to absorb this, we will be making ourselves available at the caucuses to answer your questions. But many of you know, if you've received this in the past, the first page really outlines the annual and the special articles that are being presented at the Springtown meeting. Inside is an index, and each index takes you to a different section. Each section is in yellow. You'll see that in the first section. The next page in each section is blue. That's the article, that's the language being proposed at town meeting, along with a recommendation of the committee and along with the summary intent. Following that, you'll find on page 3, for example, Article 16A, I'm just going through this so you understand how the book works before we dive into it, is that's the actual application that was received by the Community Preservation Committee. So the Community Preservation Committee is required to put out an application each cycle, and we update it, we send it out. People fill out the application, they bring it to the committee makes decisions, and whatever decisions we make, we include all of that information in our recommendations. So the material that we were using to make our conclusions is the same material that you're receiving. So you can see there on that page, it takes you all the way to page 36. So that's just kind of how the book works. That's an example how Article 16A is presented in the briefing material. Now we'll go to the PowerPoint. I'll be quick about it. Again, I have the applicants with us tonight. They have a few things that they want to also clarify. And for the first article, it's Article 16A, which is affordable housing. And as we move into this town meeting, we are really setting a record. This is kind of a historic moment for the Community Preservation Act in terms of how much money is being spent at town meeting relevant to affordable housing. This is a significant recommendation, a series of them, 16A, B, and C, are all about affordable housing. And we have heard the community and they're concerned about affordable housing, and we are making that effort clear to town meeting this spring with our recommendations. This article here, 16A, is for 54 Industrial Park Road. It's an application that's being submitted to us by the Plymouth Area Coalition for $3 million. As a result of this, we'll have 26 deed-restricted affordable housing family units. This is a facility that is designed around people who have lost their home. They have a child, and the family needs to find housing. So this is a type of housing that's addressing a demographic in the the very diverse community that we're trying to provide affordable housing to. 16A is addressing a demographic that we've never addressed before. Plymouth does not have a facility like this that if a family gets into an emergency situation and they have to be housed, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts does have a responsibility to keep that child the right to shelter, and those families and children are moved out of our community to other facilities. The town does still maintain a responsibility towards that child in the school system, having to transport them back and forth. So obviously we'd like to have a facility here in Plymouth so it's not as disruptive to the family. Plymouth Area Coalition will provide an on-site supportive housing program to identify permanent housing for residents. So people go to live at this facility for approximately a year, up to a year. There are educational opportunities within the building. Each floor has a meeting space where family meets with a counselor to give them those life skills necessary to strengthen the family's ability to provide and to find adequate shelter. There's also duty on staff in this facility overnight. So you're coming into a lobby, you're meeting with security staff. There'll be a deed restriction on this unit for housing. Currently, this location is an industrial park. To utilize a use of this nature through zoning, you would have to use the Dover Amendment, which has been recognized already in the industrial park. There's already, I believe, 3 to 4 different other Dover Amendment usages in that location with charter schools and the like. So this is an industrial park. But you can have a facility like this. It has been approved by zoning under the zoning Dover Amendment. And another thing is that it is in a part of Plymouth where public transportations are going by the site, and they are obviously in an area where there's employment opportunities. But more importantly, the focus of this facility not only will be housing these families, but also there's an educational center on the lower level where classes will be offered to families to help break the cycle of the results of a family losing a home. This is the exterior facility site of the building. Currently, it would get a dormer on top. There's the side elevation of the renovations. It has a very nice homey feel to the building. And this gives you an indication of what the location is. The front door in the security in the lobby, and then the enter into these units where the families are housed. Obviously in the back there's opportunities for meeting with counselors and different other services that are provided. And here again, here's the lower level where there is a kitchen and cafeteria area. And I would like to introduce Sue Giovanetti from the Plymouth Area Coalition. They can give you kind of a quick overview of where they are in this process.
Thank you. Sue Giovanetti, Plymouth Area Coalition. This has been a long time dream for the coalition to really find another location to add to the services that we have provided in town since 1985. There's been a long time shortage of housing units available for families that find themselves in a homeless situation, and the program that we offer is all about bringing families into a situation where they can become self-sustainable, and that's why this is very basic. We're not changing the exterior of the building. We're really doing some minor adaptations within the building to accommodate the families and the program itself. It's what we would call a congregate situation where families use one large kitchen to prepare their meals and share dining space. The lower level will have a very large, what I consider large compared to what we're using right now, education area that will house various different classes. We are certainly looking for other areas of funding, and the state will be very much involved in helping to fund this program. We're hopeful. We're still waiting on that decision. But we've had support from our legislative team, and certainly garnered a lot of support from within the town. For a town of like 65,000 people, for us not to have a close-to-home facility to house homeless families while they become self-sustainable, it's time that we do that. And this is a great opportunity. It places our work right in the middle of everything they need: transportation, job opportunities, education. It's close to schools. It's close to all of the major thoroughfares. So we've been looking long and hard for a very long time to identify property, and we have done all of our homework, so to speak, as far as the researching and getting the legal precedent with the Dover Amendment, and certainly working with town officials to try and make sure that we're doing everything that would be acceptable. So I think it's a great opportunity for town. We are going to be holding an open house that we would certainly have for the for town meeting members.
Yeah, just send me the dates of that, and I'll make sure that we get the dates out. I want to move on to questions, if we could, please. So we're going to open it up. Mr. Costello.
Just a couple quick questions, Mr. Cohen. Does the town get credit for all 26 units in our stock for affordable housing?
Okay, very good question. Excellent question. So the subsidized housing inventory, SHI, is something that Mass Housing in Livable Communities oversees. The reason they oversee that number for each town, because if you're not at 10%, if you're less than 10%, you're subject to a 40B. Right now, Plymouth is at about 6.8, 6.9%. We're not at 10, so we're subject to 40Bs. So obviously, the committee, if you look at that application, you'll see in the application we have our goals and priorities. And one of our goals is hitting SHI, Substantive Housing Inventory. You know, that's a goal, but it's not a requirement of the CPA. Now, the CPA is out there looking at the whole field, the playing field when it comes to affordable housing, looking at people in different demographics. So we don't get count for that, but Alan, let me finish. This is important because the next article.
Simple yes or no.
We're not getting a count for it, but I do have to say this.
So why would you mention it? Why mention it?
Because it's important to note on the next, on 16B, you're going to be voting to buy down 6 units of affordable housing in a complex of 40 units. Now, the SHI there, we're not going to get credit for just 6. We're going to get credit for all 40 because that's how SHI count works with mass housing and livable communities. So we won't get credit for these 26, but over on 16B, we're going to get credit for 40 because it's a rental complex, and the inventory gives us that.
All right, so we'll talk about that when we get to that one. But my second question was, there's no preference for town residents in this project. Is that correct? Did I hear that in an earlier meeting?
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
I'd be happy to answer that. The way families are placed in any EA program is by within 20 miles of the community in which they went homeless in. So if you were living in Plymouth right now and you found yourself in a homeless situation, the state would place you in a unit that was as close to your home community as possible. There are situations that preclude families from returning or being close to the community in which they went homeless in. It could be matters of domestic violence, or it could be any number of circumstances that families really don't want to go back to the community. They might have been in Plymouth, but they don't want to come back. So every effort is made by the state to place families within their community if there's an opportunity. Right now, there's no opportunity. There's absolutely no family homeless program in the town of Plymouth. We have our program in Kingston on Route 80. That only has 13 units, and that's why we've been looking for so long to find property that we could identify that would meet all the needs. So you can't say that Plymouth families would always have be placed when there's an available unit as close as possible to the community they went homeless in, if that was available.
Mr. Costello?
But there's nothing in place that saves a certain capacity within the unit aside from Plymouth.
You couldn't afford to stay open and do that.
If I became homeless, to use your example, 6 months, a year after this place opens and it's full, it doesn't do me, a resident, any good. Is that true?
You would be guaranteed as a resident of the state of Massachusetts of getting a unit that was as close as possible to your home community. I hope that helps. There's no guarantees because
well, my concern is that as a resident today, and as everyone in this room today, we're kicking into this fund $3 million. And there's no assurance, or you can't, or the state can't assure me that if I, in the future, ever needed it, I have any opportunity of realizing a spot in that unit.
There's no guarantee of there's no guarantee on any given day how many families will be homeless in the town of Plymouth.
Mr. Costello, is your question, just to clarify, are you saying that because people from outside of Plymouth may be able to secure spots, that you wouldn't be able to get a spot, or that it will fill up and there's still going to be a need?
It could, per her example, it could be filled up by others. So if I needed a spot, I wouldn't have an opportunity. I mean, I'm not worried.
Yeah.
And I think it's a good thing if other people needed it. But if a Plymouth resident needed it, they may not have an opportunity to use it.
Well, they may not. Say if it wasn't an available unit today, according to EOHLC regulations, every month EA programs have to revisit families that would like to be within 20 miles of their home community. It's revisited so every month that data is revisited, and if there's an opening, it's not unusual to swap families because someone wants to get closer.
The difference is we now, as residents of town, have a financial stake in that facility.
Obviously, definitely, but it's also an investment in all families within the town of Plymouth.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
So we're going to move on, Mr. Arienti, and then I have Mr. Brewster, and then Mr. Tavares.
Okay. Thank you. First off, I saw that there was a support staff within the unit, within the buildings. Could you tell me, is that staff 24 hours a day, or is it 9 to 5? Or?
Staffing is 24/7. During the day, there's caseworkers, residential staff, and during the evening, midnight to 8, there's security in addition.
Okay, and who, is that staff included in the $3 million that we'd be paying out? Or does somebody pick up that, or does the town of Plymouth on that?
So this is, the request is to get us to a place where we can actually do the work, the interior work, to get this operation up and running. We operate on a contract with the state, and that's how we have operated. Actually, we've had this particular EA contract since 1994. So those fees for staffing and operations are within the contract, and we just received last year a 10-year grant again. So we have that operations grant for an additional 10 years.
And excuse me if I'm rushing you, I'm sorry, but are there any restrictions on who you rent to? Say, or not rent to, but it's someone who is a homeless family. If they're homeless because they were thrown out of their apartment because they were dealing drugs, are they allowed to come into this unit?
In the state of Massachusetts, any child that is homeless is guaranteed housing. That's been since 1982. By default, every child has to have a parent or guardian, so it's a family EA program. So is there the state certainly isn't putting, these are good people. These are just people who have found themselves in a situation without housing. So I hope that answered your question.
No, I understand. I worked with Dove in Quincy as a firefighter.
Yeah.
And I love the job. I understand what you're doing, and I commend you for doing it. However, there are, some wonderful people out there, and there are some not so wonderful people out there. There are some people who may take advantage of the situation because they messed up royally to screw somebody else, pardon the expression. But
so
I want to make sure that...
I think that I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think that to understand an EA program, families come into the program and it's just that. There's an expectation. They sign an agreement to go by certain rules and regulations. They're held to that expectation. If they do not meet those rules, after 3 not what we call non-compliances, they can be terminated. So there are expectations. The idea of this whole program is really to identify housing for a family that can be self-sustainable, and that's the educational component. So there are rules. In a facility like this, it's considered congregate. Everyone has a chore that's assigned. It's on a rotating basis. So just like you've got your own home, You have the kitchen duty this week. You have the bathroom. That's how it works. If you don't do your chore, you get a warning. So it's not, there are expectations, and the adults are held to those expectations. There's programs in place to provide tutoring and mentoring for the children. There's workplace development. There's a lot happening, but I think the important piece, because we're talking about housing, is really that what we're trying to do is build these families up so that they can then, in fact, move on to their own housing. And unfortunately, you know, there's a great need and a continuing need in our community.
I understand. I have a quick question for Mr. Cohen.
Yes.
Could you tell me, how much would we have to borrow, or do we have sufficient funds in the CPC right now to do this?
I'll leave that to Lynn Barrett to go over her recommendations to the committee when it comes to 16A, B, C, and D.
Welcome, Lynn Barrett, Head of Finance.
Hi. So for Article 16A, we're recommending to borrow. Based on the number of applications that they received this year, we had recommendations for their annual revenue sources to do other things. So this one is a recommendation to borrow.
And do you have any idea how much it would be on the tax rate for the following year or for the subsequent years? How much it would add?
So the only thing that's on your taxes for CPA is the 1.5% surcharge.
Okay, so all the money would be paid out of that surcharge?
It's all paid out of the surcharge.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you very
Yep.
much.
Mr. Brewster, then Mr. Tavares, then Mr. Golden.
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Bill. First, I just putting it in the industrial park, is this the best place for this? And I have gotten calls from some of the abutters that they're not really happy about it. I understand that this came up, and, you know, great that this came up, but I'm not sure this is the best place for this. And then, I don't know if you want to go line by line, but to continue the discussion of the economics of this, it's what, 10 million that we're asking for all of these, all of your articles?
Correct.
Okay. If Lynn, could you talk about the whole thing? I will not at some point. Thank you.
Just to go back, as Sue indicated, the coalition has been looking for a facility for some time. It's difficult to find a location in Plymouth where you can provide the educational opportunities that's provided in this model. This model is about people living in a facility and having these counselors there for daily activities and classes being offered. Under those activities, you qualify for the zoning under the Dover Amendment. Now, right now, there's other educational facilities operating out of that industrial park. There are other places. I believe there's at least 2 or 3 charters that might be operating out of there.
Other educational, but there's not. There's other educational, but there isn't a facility that houses.
Correct. In that capacity, we're right on a public transportation. There's access to intermodal transportation and trains into town and job opportunities in the area. Plymouth is quite rural in many senses. Once you get out of the village center, you're in a very rural area. We didn't want to have that for the families to struggle with all the other competing elements of making it difficult for people being in a rural area and lacking transportation, job opportunities, and extended transportation opportunities. This came out to be a very effective location. We do comply by zoning, and they have done a lot of research and opportunities where we could place this, where the people would be maximizing the effect of the benefits that are offered at this facility.
Very good. Moving on.
But I will have Lynn talk about these other matters that you brought up at the end.
She can do it at the end of the beginning. It's $10 million.
Yeah, we're going to get through these, and then we'll talk through that. Very good. Mr. Tavares.
Actually, my question is for Mrs. Giovanetti, if possible. So currently, right now, having read through this briefly, softly, and then looking at the book here, so currently, right now, how many families does the coalition support that are homeless?
We have 13 at the Kingston shelter.
Yeah.
And we were asked to temporarily oversee the Baymont Inn in Kingston, where we have 96.
96, okay. And then this would be 26 units, but this, how does that eat into those numbers? Because you're looking at 103
Doesn't
families. It doesn't. So this would be...
No, I mean, the Kingston, the Baymont is a temporary situation. The last resort for the state is to go into a hotel.
Sure.
We were asked a year and a half ago to take on the management of that, which we were happy to do, given unforeseen and unprecedented times. This was in the works long before the current situation. So, yeah, I hope that answers.
No, it does. I mean, this is going to be a significant number for you guys to take on, but this would be 26 plus those 13 you would still hold on to as well?
Oh, absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Golden.
Thank you, Catherine. Sue, thank you for being here tonight, and thank you for the work that you and your team do for some of our most vulnerable people in the Commonwealth. I'm curious to know, do you know of any other communities in Massachusetts that have used CPA funds for homeless shelters in the past?
I can't speak to that. I believe that we have some housing in North Plymouth that utilized it, that was a combination of the task force and Father Bills.
So an example of that would be on Court Street. In 2000, I believe in 2010, we acquired a duplex, 10-bedroom complex, congregate living, similar circumstance, in a residential area right up on North Plymouth, across from Cordage or the old Green Thumb or the old Registry or a Dunkin' Donuts there. So it's right on the corner of Spooner in Court Street. And then later on, in around 2014, we acquired a second building because we wanted to comply with the state's requirement that we have an opportunity for women and men. You can't deny someone access to a complex like that because they're a woman or a man, but we knew that we were in congregate living, so we went ahead and acquired the property on the corner by the 9/11 memorial there.
Excuse me for 1 second. I'm going to interrupt. I think that your question was, are there other communities?
Yep.
Not whether Plymouth has used it, but the question is, have other communities used CPCA funds?
I can definitely check with the coalition to see. I have spoken to the Community Preservation Coalition in Boston. I've also spoken to Mass Housing and Livable Communities and Mass Housing Partnership. The staff there has indicated that this is not inconsistent to other communities at different times using CPA funds for affordable housing.
A quick follow-up. Thank you for mentioning the coalition bill. So you've run this specific project by the coalition, and they've said that this is within the bounds of the
coalition did indicate that we should speak with people over at the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities. Used to be DHCD. They have a new name. So that's who we were in contact with. There's also Mass Housing, which is a nonprofit entity that helps answer questions of that nature. But I did not get an example of other towns, but I'll ask that.
Did those groups indicate that this would be consistent with the Community Preservation Act?
Correct.
And is town council, has they signed off on
I guess
this?
town council has looked at it, and we'll have to weigh in on where town council is on that. That question was asked at the last meeting. We're still waiting to hear.
Okay.
So.
Thank you.
We're moving on to Ms. Adelman.
Thank you. This complex is in a very parking lot type area. I'm wondering if you'll have a natural play area for the children. Thank you.
Yes, we will. There is a play area fenced in that's part of the design work.
Thank you, Ms. Adelman. Is there any other question? Mr. Hutchinson, yes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This question might be for Ms. Barrett. The amount of $10 million for all three, is that what we were discussing?
Approximately, yes. And I was trying to get through Article 16AB through A, B, C, and D, and then we can talk to Lynn about that. But if you notice the book, there's quite a few other articles that are paying down borrowing authorization. So we do have a means of
so I have a
recommending this and
question,
managing that. Yep.
What's the town's policy for the use of the general fund and free cash with respect to affordable housing of various sorts?
What was your question?
I'm sorry. What is the town's policy on the use of general funds or free cash with respect to affordable housing of various sorts? So, could the town fund these kinds of projects out of the general fund?
So they could if they wanted to. I mean, we don't specifically have a policy. Our free cash policy basically is to use free cash for one-time type of capital expenditures for the town, for departmental equipment and other things that the town departments need. It's not necessarily used for affordable housing. I think what the legislature provided for cities and towns was the Community Preservation Act, and it was a resource and a way to do affordable housing, and that's what the town of Plymouth is using our CPA fund for.
So basically, the policy by default is that you're going to use CPA funds for requests for affordable housing requests.
Yes.
And that means that if Mr. Vio, for example, came to us next year with a deeply affordable model, we'd continue to use the CPA fund to fund that.
Yes.
Okay.
Very good.
It's an interesting point that you make, because the Community Preservation Act is housing, historical, and open space. So we're a funding mechanism for not one. And we've always had to balance that in Plymouth, because there is a crisis when it comes to historical resources and affordable housing and open space, so it's a balancing. But you do touch on a very specific issue that the Commonwealth and a lot of people are facing. There is a crisis. The CPA, if you used all of its money, could not solve the crisis for a community of the magnitude of Plymouth. We need to start looking at our state legislatures and asking them to commit to public housing, and so obviously on a federal level. We've seen a diminishing commitment on a federal and state level for public housing over the last couple of generations. That's why we're in the crisis that we're in, that we're not building enough housing, because no one town can meet that challenge, because you already have to raise appropriate money for highway, police, schools, plowing, infrastructure. Yeah, you could go to town meeting and ask them to take money and use it for public housing, but you would be encroaching these other responsibilities that you have. So that's why we need to turn to Beacon Hill and Capitol Hill and ask these delegations to make more of a commitment to help towns like Plymouth.
But just to finish up.
All right, just so we're going to keep them crisp tonight. I've got another question over here. So if you have one quick question, Joe, and then we're going to go to David, and then we're going to move on.
Yeah, I was just going to make the point that the CPA is sort of the infinite pipeline for these kinds of housing requests. That's all. Thanks.
Very good. So, Mr. Golden?
Thanks, Catherine. I'll be brief. I think Bill makes an important point here. You can sit down, Bill. I'm not going to ask you a question. I'm going to agree with you. We shouldn't be looking towards the general fund for these sorts of projects. In the definitions for the Community Preservation Act, it defines support for community housing as including but not limited to programs that provide grants, loans, rental assistance, security deposits, interest rate write-downs, or other forms of assistance directly to individuals and families who are eligible for community housing, or to an entity that owns, operates, or manages such housing for the purpose of making housing affordable. The CPA is designed specifically for this. So we're already taxed for this purpose. We shouldn't be double taxing residents to create affordable housing.
Only questions, Mr. Golden. But thank you for sharing that. It's very good.
Dave.
All right, we're moving on. 16B.
Excuse me, 16 B, if you look at your index page, it starts on page 37. You can turn to 37, and you can see the yellow section where the 16B starts, and you can see 38 where you have the actual article language. And I will get this thing to move forward. It was working a minute ago. Oh, there it is, 16B. 16B is affordable housing. The applicant, McGreco, is a private-public partnership. This is an example of a private-public partnership. We've worked with the developer in previous years on State Road down in Manomet. A couple years ago, we did 26 units of housing. The developer built the housing, offered the units to be deed restricted down to affordable. They own the building. The Housing Authority qualifies people, and they maintain the building. But we have the restriction, and the people that can occupy it have to qualify. So we're also did this program out on Carver Road, out by Market Basket a few years ago, and now we're looking at 132, 134 Court Street, the Davis Manor development. It's $960,000 to convert 16 units to market rate, from market rate down to a deed-restricted unit. So right now, these 6 units are market rate. We would buy them down for $160,000, the 6 units with a deed restriction. The affordable units will be maintained, no future cost to the town of Plymouth. It's a downtown location on Gatra, public transportation, very walkable area. Also, it is close to transportation, and the renovations that they are underway, this project is already underway. They were permitted under inclusionary zoning. They put up a complex of nearly 40 units. They were required to make 10% of those units affordable, so they had to do 4 units affordable. They are doing those 4 units at their cost. They are putting those 4 units in, and then we're going to be adding to that with these 6 units. There is an example of the building. It's very reminiscent of the Davis Manor, the building that was up on Cherry Hill. That was a hill called Cherry Hill. There's the building from the front end elevation from the street and the side. This would have a total of 10 affordable units comprised on this, and it would be right on Court Street, right next to the Housing Authority, to the south, and behind it, the current development that's going in. This is an example of the units, the interior units, where the 1-bedroom units are, and their bathrooms and their kitchenettes. This is the design that they have. This is, again, a front elevation of the building, very residential appearing, very much like you would have seen on this side of town 100 years ago, where you had large residences along Court Street. And there it is right there on an elevation drawing. I have Rick Veo, the developer that we've worked with in the past on State Road and Carver Road. He's here to answer any of your questions. Rick, if you would like to come up and join us.
Okay, I'm going to open it up to questions. Any questions? Mr. Costello.
Just to follow up, so
sorry.
We get credit for 6. We get credit for the 4 that the builder is going to produce. You mentioned earlier we get credit for all of them.
So,
Can you explain that?
Yeah, so under the subsidized...
Quickly. I mean, I don't want to take a lot of time.
I'm going to be quick.
Why are we getting credit for all of them?
It's just the way that the state...
So in 1970, when the state adopted 40B anti-snob law, they felt that apartments were very important, more important than home ownership, that there was a need for apartments. So when they did the law, they just gave additional credits to towns who do apartments. So if it's rental and it's 25%, all units, like the 40Bs we have, 320 units, only 25% is affordable. All 320 count towards our inventory. So again, the state, when they made the law up, for whatever reason, said, if you do apartments at 25%, we'll let you count all of them towards your list.
As long as they're rented and not
right. If it's owner occupied, that would be out.
All right.
Excellent, Mr. Hartman. Thank you for clarifying. So
just one quick question.
Go right ahead, Mr. Costello.
Bill, historically, what is the town typically paying for an affordable unit? This is 160 here. It was 115 the last. Do you have any data that says historically what are we spending for an affordable unit?
Well, I'd have to, this would be a good time to allow Rick to indicate what he's building these units for. He's offering the restriction at a certain amount. But Rick, if you want
I'm asking overall in the history of CPA. I have no problem with
well,
this project.
it fluctuates from complex to
you don't
complex
have a
over the
number.
years.
Okay, thank
There
you.
isn't it really, it does, I do not have a number.
That's fine, that's fine, thank you.
That's okay, we're moving on. Mr. Weber, do you have a question?
So those numbers typically range from $120,000 to $200,000 per unit.
Very good.
And it
Thank you.
depends on where it is, if it's on town sewer, how much the land cost, development costs, site work costs, that type of thing. But that's the range. So this is about average for a downtown location.
That's simply what I was sort of, looking for, to see if it was in line with what we've done in the past. Thank you.
Very good, we're moving on. 16C.
Okay. Article 16C, affordable housing. This is at Cranberry Commons, Red Brook. It is a request for $4 million of CPA funds for 62 units of deed-restricted housing. This restricted housing will be for 62 and older. It's one-bedroom units. There's 43 units that will be deed-restricted, affordable, under 30 and 80% of the area median income. That's AMI. You'll hear that referenced at different times. That is a good thing, obviously, because now we're bringing the eligibility down to to a level that is truly affordable. Obviously, initially there'll be 19 units still deemed affordable at 80%, and then that's a pretty high number. So it's a welcome change at 30 and 80% with these units. All 62 units will qualify towards the town's subsidized housing inventory, that SHI that we were talking about earlier tonight. At the town's request to Mass Housing, Livable Communities, there will be a local preference set aside for Plymouth residents up to 70% of the units on the initial lease. So as these units are all leased out, local preference is provided. But as time comes along, that local preference in terms of the renting at a different point does change that number at different times. But initially they're offered at 70%. The on-site manager will, there's an on-site manager, and it's close to the community services that are provided and being built around the green at Red Brook. The financial partnership the project is about $25,000. It's seeking state and federal tax credits and local and state housing trust money. Mass Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities home funds. So they are looking at other funding mechanisms. I have tonight Dan from Red Brook and representatives from the Grantham Group to talk about the project and the changes that we have, because initially we were looking at 52 units. Now we're looking at 62 units. They've been able to meet with the neighborhood and move the building accordingly to accommodate some of the concerns of where the building would be placed. They will up their commitment to the town from 103 units to 113 units. And so these changes have changed our FinCom's decision on where they would be on this. So we have a change of the FinCom recommendation. And I have here Dan. Dan, if you'd like to touch on some of the changes.
I do have to make one change up here. No, keep it as brief as Good evening, everyone. My name is Dan Gorska. I'm the Vice President of Development for the 80 Makepeace Company down at the Red Brook Development in South Plymouth. I'm also here this evening with Walter Ohanian, who's the partner for the Grantham Group. So we have a presentation just to put together. Again, I'll be as brief as I can, and we can open up to questions. This is just a photo showing the location. For those that aren't familiar with Red Brook is a master plan community permitted back in 2008 for the town of Plymouth through a special permit process. This project is located on land that we own down at Red Brook that we'll be donating to the Grantham Group. This is on the corner of River Run Way, which is the main public road that goes from Bourne Road to Wareham Road, and on the intersection of Wareham Road, and this is on the northeast corner. This is just a few things about Grantham Group. I won't read every one. More importantly is they've been in the developing affordable housing and assisted living for 25 plus years, and they are a Massachusetts-based developer. The closest project to Plymouth is located in Situate. So as Bill mentioned, there are 62 total units. All 100% of them are income restricted. You have 19 of them at or below 80% AMI, 30 of them at or below 60% AMI, and 13 of them at or below 30% AMI. As Bill mentioned, 70% initial local preference at lease-up. That has to be requested by the Select Board, which they intend to do. All 62 units are one-bedrooms. These are age-restricted, 62 plus.
Please define AMI for the people, the town meeting members that are not familiar with it.
Absolutely, thank you. Sometimes I take advantage that everyone knows. So AMI is area median income, and that's part of the 40B statutes as it relates to affordable housing. The required AMI for affordable housing is 80%. This project goes below that. So the lower that percentage AMI goes, that means reduced rent. So people that are at 30% AMI are paying much less than 60, and those folks at 60% are paying much less than 80. And 80% AMI compared to 100%, which would be market rate. All 100%, all 62 are eligible to on the subsidized housing inventory, and these units, so they're targeted to low-income seniors, so age-restricted 62 plus. Just want to spend some time. This project, we first made an announcement back in November about pursuing this level of project. It was met with some resistance, I would say opposition, questions, concerns about its previous location. After a series of meetings, public meetings, private meetings, one-on-one meetings, planning board updates, A&F meetings, select board, resident meetings, we made substantial changes. We moved the project location across the street. We also, one of the requests was the initial permit for Red Brook, the commitment of 103 affordable. They've asked if we could do more and go above and beyond that, so we went from 103 to 113. The original project here was proposed at 52 units, now 62 units. Again, 62 is counted towards the town subsidized housing inventory, but only 52 would be counted towards our special permit. One of the other big concerns besides the location was parking. The Town of Plymouth bylaw is a half a space per unit when it comes to this type of housing. So this new plan that we have will have a 1-to-1 parking ratio, so 62 spaces with the ability to expand. So again, we're here for the request of $4 million. For all 62 units, the request per door is slightly below $65,000 per unit. And again, all 100% are income restricted. The funds are used to buy down deep affordability in perpetuity and to allow a project like this to be financeable. So just to give you an indication what this chart shows from left to right, the right-hand side is the Grantham plan, the left side is a market rate plan, and then the two things in between are different scenarios. So what I want to point your attention to on the right-hand side, and this is in monthly rents, that area of gray between, is there a light on there? Perfect. So between this line and this line, that is the amount on a monthly basis that the rent is reduced for people that are less fortunate to be able to provide housing for. So that's nearly, so you can see here, nearly $80,000 or so on a monthly basis of reduced rent for people. And that's what that subsidy of the $4 million goes for. It allows a project like that that is making nearly half the amount of rent in a market condition to be financeable. This next slide, same information on the left, but this does it over a course of a year. And you can see, again, that gray area here represents nearly, I think it's $800,000 of subsidized rent that $4 million goes to pay for in perpetuity, and that's on a yearly basis. This next slide shows it projected over a 5-year period with some inflation numbers in there as well. I want you to focus on that red line that's here that goes from left to right. Over a course of a 5-year period, the amount of rent savings for those folks that are less fortunate is nearly $4.5 million over a 5-year period. And that's only for 5 years. So imagine in 10, 15, 20, or so on. This next slide, and Bill alluded to it, there's other funds that are being sourced.
As I said, the land is being donated by the 80 Makepeace Company. We're also committed to hand them over a pad-ready site. What I mean by pad-ready, currently the site is a wooded lot that we've agreed to clear, grub, fill to subgrade, and provide utility connections to for the Grantham Group. Grantham Group will also be seeking tax credits, home funds, conventional financing for a total development cost of approximately $30 million. When Walter comes up, if you guys have questions about financing, he can take those. This is just a site plan, just quickly. Again, this is the northeast corner. Here's River Run Way, Wareham Road. Here's the new facility. It's an L-shaped building. It's adjacent to the Red Brick Apartments. So the building size, architecture, scale is consistent with prior approvals for the apartments. The parking spaces I mentioned earlier, people were concerned about how many parking spaces there were. This new plan shows a total of 62 parking spaces encompassed in the site as a whole. And then I know it's hard to see, but in the event that the planning board is looking for additional, just in case, some people are concerned is 62 parking spaces enough. So we said, well, we have enough land space, let's show. So there's a dashed line that gets you, I want to say it's another 12 to 15 parking spaces in the event that it's needed. With that, I'll just hand it over to Walter for a few minutes.
Thanks, Dan. Thank you, everyone, for having me tonight. My name is Walter Ohanian, and I am the managing director of the Grantham Group. Besides, what Dan had shown you a little bit about what the outside of the project would look like, I did just want to kind of give you an idea about the interiors of the project as well, is even though this is considered affordable housing, it will still be built like market rate housing itself. As you can see on the top right side, that is a general living room that you have when you come into the community so that the residents can enjoy a nice common space and enjoy each other's company amongst each other. Down on the lower right side, you'll see a common space that we have for the residents, for all the residents to be able to enjoy each other's company, whether it be in a group activity, whether it be bringing in someone to do a flu clinic for them, whether they want to have a meal together or something of that nature. Remember, these are 62 one-bedroom apartments, so some of their common space will also be the actual within the building itself. As to be expected with any new building, obviously fully sprinkled, it will be serviced by an elevator, will be built to the energy stretch code, including high energy efficiency. And we will also have a leasing agent on site who not only will be there to lease the units, but she'll also be there to help oversee the residents and things that they may need as well. Perfect. So with the 62 one-bedroom units, they're roughly 690 square feet. I did just kind of want to give you an idea what the apartments look like themselves. So this actually isn't a model apartment. This is a resident apartment of ours who lives in our Situate community. On the top right, you can see they have the kitchen with all the appliance areas. They'll also have a full laundry room as well within the community itself, within their own unit itself. You'll see in the middle picture, it's their living and their sitting room, nice large windows, a lot of light coming in. And then in the bottom, they have their bedroom area that's there as well. Each unit will individually control its own temperature, and really the building is built to help residents age in place. Even though there are a certain number of units that are considered fully handicap accessible, the units can be adapted to become handicap accessible for anyone who needs it after they move in. People always ask, well, what type of resident's going to live here? So this is actually a resident of ours who is in our Marlborough community. You can see enjoying, this is John Kasparian. John's enjoying the raised planter bed that he has. The average age of our residents is about 76 years old. 80% we anticipate are female, 95% are widowed. Something's happened. Really the reason why they may need to move to a community, move out of their own current home, they'll have the ability to do it. 90% of our residents come from within a 10-mile radius. Someone just because they need housing, they have the ability to hopefully be able to stay in Plymouth or in the surrounding area of Plymouth itself. And all of our residents will be on a fixed income. So just to recap, once again, it's 100% affordable. 62 units will count towards the town's SHI. There can be a 70% local preference that will be done at lease-up. The request per door is just under $65,000, and 100% of the units will be targeted towards low-income seniors.
Very good. Okay, thank you so much for that. So we're going to open it up to, Mr. Hartman has a comment, and then I'm going to open it up to questions, so warm yourself up.
Just real quick comments. So when we adopted the affordable housing bylaw in 2006, we always envisioned it to be a partnership between the developers and the community. So simply if you have a 10-unit development, you get an 11th unit, and that unit has to be affordable. We knew when we adopted that bylaw, it was going to cost more money for the developer to build that affordable unit than he was going to get back. We always looked at this as being a partnership. Didn't really work out that way. Once we approved it, most everybody said, well, that's your problem, you deal with it. But again, just as I look at these types of proposals, we had always envisioned that we were saying to the development community, help us with affordable housing, but let's do it as a partnership.
Very good, thank you. Carmen?
Thank you for all that information. Great opportunity. You know, and I continue to see all this expansion, if you will, residential expansion, and I just keep going back into my mind about supporting. How are we going to be supporting all of these new residents? I think it's great. You know, especially this age group. You know, they're not spring chickens, if you will. No offense to anybody, but I'm just curious. I mean, I might live in there someday. What am I going to depend on? What kind of planning are we doing behind the scenes to support this type of opportunity?
So first of all, I share your frustrations. The Commonwealth has a goal of 350,000 new houses or new units to be built in the Commonwealth. So the pressure is on all communities. As you saw with MBTA, they want more units. I would just point out in this case here, these are private roads, private wastewater system, private water, no kids, because these are, you can see by the age and things. So there is an impact probably for emergency response services, but very minimal impacts for the other services on the town.
And it's important to note that this was part of the original agreement, so regardless, these units are going to be built because it was under the original permits that 103 units. Now they're going to volunteer and move it to 110. There was an agreement that was done years ago as a result of the permitting they received. So these are going to be built with our funding or without our funding.
Yeah, again, I think it's a great opportunity, but I'm not.
Oh, hold on 1 second. I think there's a comment.
I'd like to clarify that statement. So the special permit has 80% AMI. This project would not be constructed as it's constituted today without CPC funding and state funding. The reason for the funding request from us and from the Grantham is because those low rents at 30 and 60% AMI. The requirement of the 40B statute is 80% AMI. To give you perspective, that's nearly $2,000 a month. You're going to have folks paying here as low as $370. So I just don't want their conception being that if this doesn't get approval, this is being built anyways, because that's not true.
Thanks for the clarity on that. Carmen, you have a rebuttal.
I'm just curious. My ultimate question isn't really being addressed, which is what are we doing to support these type of expansions and these opportunities?
What you're talking about is a cost of services. What I was indicating was not misleading anyone. It was you were talking about the people that are coming and the services they're needing. I'm not talking about the ADI or whether or not they have a commitment to build 113 units, and that's their commitment. Those people are coming. It's a dilemma that Lee Hartman's office deals with every day. When people come in looking for permits as of right to build out the town of Plymouth, we're looking at more services needed in our fire, police, and our school, and all the other things that come along with a growing community. That's why we've tried to utilize the CPA in a strategic way of protecting open space to control the cost of services and some of the other things that we've done in the past. So we need more tools in the toolbox to manage that event because if Plymouth was built out as of right, not even without special permits, Plymouth would be seeing escalating costs of services.
What I'm hearing is that there is no plan. Okay, just so that we're clear, there's no plan and to build. So very good. So I have Ms. Adelman. Did you? You turned. Okay, she put her hand down. Very good. Mr. Delafield, and then Wrestling Brewster.
Yeah, I have two questions. One is more for curiosity than anything else, and that is, why do we, being a senior myself, but we also have people in our community who are younger, who are either single or married, never plan to have kids, who have a need for housing. Why was that not done here? That's number one, and then I'll hit both of them and you can answer them. The other one is, you're very far out of the town and other services. what plans are there to give people the ability to get around and to do things? That worries me with this plan.
I'll let Dan speak to the services that are provided in the community, but I think we have to understand when the CPA makes recommendations to town meeting on affordable housing, we're always looking at different demographics across the board. Over 23 years, we've been dealing with disabled people, elderly people, young people, workforce housing. So if you look at the history of the CPA, we're always going to town meeting with different recommendations that cover a different demographic in that kaleidoscope of needs out there when it comes to affordable housing. The word affordable housing comes with a definition that reaches the gauntlet from people just starting out looking for housing to someone downsizing or someone coming across a crisis. But Dan can talk to the services.
Sure. Thank you. So just a couple things on a public transportation comment. When people buy at Redbrook, whether it's affordable or whether it's market rate, they are making a conscious decision that you are moving to southwestern Plymouth, and most stores are 15 to 20 minutes away. So when folks, if they're afforded the opportunity to live here, that is something that they're going to have to deeply consider as far as how to get to and where to get to and how they're going about that. I will say the town we know has GATRA. Redbrook's not a stop on GATRA, but I know there's a dial-a-ride. Both accessibility-wise dial-a-ride and just general dial-a-ride. You do need to call ahead and make appointments. We do have people that live in the apartments now that are using Uber as well and other rideshare services like those. Redbrook itself, I think, is unique because its location. I didn't really touch on this. If you're not familiar with Redbrook, this is adjacent to the Village Green and the Village Center. Right now we have a variety of amenities that people use on a day-to-day basis and that these folks can be afforded the same opportunity. So there's a YMCA, full-service fitness center. Obviously, these folks won't be using the daycare, but there's also a daycare there. There's Long Pond Physical Therapy. There's Beth Israel Leahy for primary care services, and then there's a couple restaurants and hopefully more to come as far as those level of services. And I just want to touch on one of the comments about the age, the demographics. So one of the things that the initial special permit contemplated was a large affordable assisted living development. Now, those aren't feasible at the moment. Walter could touch more on the reasons why as it relates to federal and state funding. So when we knew that wasn't really feasible, talking to the Grantham Group, this was a feasible project.
Mr. Brewster, and
Thank
then Chris
you.
Pratt.
I want to go back to the partnership covenant that Lee meant. The biggest controversy I've got with my constituents right now is why are we paying for Redbrook? Redbrook's got to do a certain amount on their own, and why are we paying for it? And Lee, if you could talk about that partnership a little more, I need some backup to go back to the people who asked me to look at the purse strings of the town and say, why are we paying for Redbrook?
So again, all I can say is when we adopted this bylaw, I always envisioned the Affordable Housing Trust and CPC to be partners with the development community and having some kind of program that would be created to help the builders, the developers, meet the gap for what it costs. Again, I think what happened was as soon as it was approved, everybody changed the attitude and just said, nope, that's your responsibility. But I can tell you that that was not how we envisioned this. We always looked at it more as a partnership. And I can tell you from our planning department, we do whatever we can to try to help create that affordable housing. And again, this is unique to have that buy down that we haven't seen in anything else. And this isn't, even at 30%, we're still not talking about low income. You're still talking about families earning $40,000, $50,000 a year at least. And then it goes up from there to the 80% is 80 to probably 90,000 a year you need to afford it. So, but again, we always knew that they were never going to be able to, they were going to take a loss. So we've been very lucky in this community that most of the developers have just done their responsibility, even though it costs them more money than they don't even break even.
Thank you, Mr. Hartman. Chris Pratt.
All
right, let's do Chris Pratt, and then we'll come back to you.
Two questions. The first of which is, how many of the original 103 units have been completed? And then what was the date that that agreement was reached?
Yes, that's a great question. To date, we have 15 deed-restricted affordable units online, and then 10 of them that are in progress. I will say we've been building homes for about 9 years now. It is important to know from a special permit perspective, we have base density rights and we have transfer development rights. Our first 336 were base density, so they didn't require affordable. So like the first 3 to 4 years of building, affordable weren't required. The last 3 or 4, they have been. So we're at 15 actual income restricted and another 10 that are in progress, which would be bringing us to 25.
And a follow-up, if I could, Madam Chair?
Yep, go right ahead.
And how long do you anticipate it's going to take you to build what is now, let's see, so you have 25 in process, so the select board have asked you to build a total of 113 against the original plan. How long is it going to take you to build 180 units?
So it's 113. If you take
well,
away
113 coupled with the additional units that you're requesting here, which is another 62. So, 113 plus 62, correct? 175 total?
No, so just to be clear, the permit was for 103. This project is doing 62, but we agreed that 10 of them would be above and beyond the 103. So the permit requirement at the end of the day will have 113 total affordable. If you look at those 62 plus the 25, if we did this project, that's 77. That would leave us 36, thank you. Sorry, I was trying to do math in my head. Yep, so there would be 36 remaining. From a duration standpoint, we're obligated to do it before we're done there. And I know the planning board's made it clear to us to have a game plan in place for us going forward. So candidly, based on the market and depending on things, we're anticipating upwards to the next 5 years or so.
So is that are you willing to make a commitment in terms of duration as part of the agreement to secure the $4 million? Because in 9 years, you've done 15 complete and 10 in process.
Correct. As far as time commitment, and not to put Mr. Hartman on the spot here, they need to be done before we complete, but also at the same time, the planning board has made it clear until we develop that game plan for them that's satisfactory, then we're kind of at a standstill with other developments. So we can't actually continue with everything we're trying to do without having that plan in place and having those dates associated with it.
Mr. Hartman, I think you need to clarify.
So if the project doesn't move forward, I think all bets are off and we have to refigure with the planning board how to deal with their commitment. Again, as they pointed out, they committed to more units than they were required to do. They went above and beyond. But beyond that, what they do is when they come in for development, it's neighborhood by neighborhood. So what will happen is the next neighborhood that comes in, we look at what's the requirement, how many are going to have to be built, and how will that be addressed. But it's done as they come in with each neighborhood or each phase. So as phases come in, we'll look at what they're building and what their requirement is for the affordable and what's left, what's remaining to be done for the affordable.
I don't want to speak for Ms. Pratt, but I think what I'm hearing is that it's taken a long time to get to this place. So we know that construction always increases, the costs. So I think we're looking for some type of time commitment when these units would be completed. Is that right, Ms. Pratt?
That is correct. And then just, Mr. Hartman, if you would be kind enough, I'm a bit confused about the total number of affordable units.
So the special permit requires 103. And
okay.
So this represents, and again, 52 is counted and they ask for 10 more through this process. So this will count for 50 of that 103, and then they'll have the other, then they have the 25. He knows the numbers better than me, but the 25 that are either built or being built, and then they have to make that delta.
Okay, so at the rate that you currently have built.
Yeah, I would say the 5-year number is a good number to say that within 5 years, this should all be, their commitment should be addressed.
Even though it took 9 years to do 15.
But again, as he pointed out, the way the bylaw is written, you have your core area that is hundreds of acres, and any development that came from that core wasn't required to do the affordable housing. It was only when they started pulling in what's called transfer of development rights from the different parts, other parts of town to add it here that the affordable was triggered. And they didn't do that for a number of years. So it's only recently that they started using more and more of those TDRs, which triggers the affordable. Very complex, but I think that's why there's been more of a delay over the first several years.
Ms. Pratt, are you satisfied with that answer?
Clear as mud.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. All right. So we've got, I'm gonna take a moment here. We've got Mr. Brewster, but before you start, Mr. Hutchinson also, I just want to make a note that for anybody that is a town meeting member after the chairs, I'll remind everyone in case you weren't on, the chairs speak first. I open it up to town meeting members. Town meeting members are allowed to ask questions. Any resident that wants to comment on any of these articles that we've talked about tonight, well, you can pick that up in public comment, and I will make time for you. Very good, Mr. Brewster.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to piggyback on this, I've got to go back to my taxpayer and explain this to them and explain the game. And I'm understanding that all said and done, you still have to do 36, right? Above and beyond what you've done.
What we have plus
Yes,
this part.
right, right. We're going to do the 62, but you still have to do the 36. And you're saying 5 years is probably right? Okay. And we gain a number of affordable housing above what we would have if we don't fund this, right?
Yes, that's correct.
I got to go back to my people and tell them what we're gaining by this.
Can I add one more thing?
The $3 million.
Can I add one more thing that you can add or
Yeah.
you can discuss with them? What you're also, the taxpayer dollar is also buying is that annual rent reduction for affordable housing of nearly $800,000 a year that you don't get from a traditional 80% area median income affordable housing. So you're getting the 10 additional units, plus you're getting what members of the planning board and staff say is true affordable housing, below the 80%.
Okay, you understand where I'm coming from.
100%.
Because they're saying, why are we paying for Red Brook? And I've got to go back and say, well, it's the gain of affordable housing and the lower rent, and you're still going to do your share. It's just we have to do this. I think Lee's comment of if we don't do this, then we're going to get less affordable housing towards what we need.
Is that are you asking for clarity, Mr. Brewster, or are you? Okay, great. Very good. Mr. Golden and then Ms. Pratt. No, you're good. Ms. Pratt has a clarifier, I think. And then we're going to go to Mr. Hutchinson.
So, I think the tiered AMI is admirable. My question is to Mr. Hartman. Mr. Hartman, is this something that we could establish with all the other affordable housing, applications that come before the CPC?
It wouldn't even be with the CPC, I think with the town. So we've talked about the bylaw we have, the inclusionary bylaw right now that says if you have 10 units, you get an 11th, and that is at 80% AMI. So we know, again, that 80% number, and it's based on a Boston-Cambridge number, so it's a high number for what it is. So it's not as affordable as what you would think. So we've talked about lowering that number to 70 or 60%. But I think to do that, we have to change the bylaw to say if you have 10 units, you get 12. One affordable and one extra unit to make up that difference because you're dropping it. I think that's kind of the approach we would have to take. But again, I think this is a great model to say maybe other developments can come in here and have a lower AMI, more affordable than what the bylaw requires. So there are a couple different ways that we can maybe tackle this.
Mr. Hartman, before you step off, though, are you saying that this is something you're looking at?
The difficult thing in Plymouth is we have so much residential development already in the town. To come in with a bylaw that says we're going to even create more is a hard thing to do until we see maybe some kind of settling of development. So I'm not really excited about coming to town meeting and saying, I've got good news for you. You already think we have too much development. Well, I'm going to add one more house to every development we already have. I think that's difficult.
The impression that I get is that people are saying we have the wrong kind of residential development. But very good. So we're going to move on. We're going to go to Mr. Hutchinson. And then I see Mr. DiNardo also is online. He is a town meeting member. He's not a chair. So we're going to stay in the chair area until we get all of our questions answered. Go right ahead, please.
Mr. Hartman, can you, I'm trying to remember the special permit details, and I know that you remember them all. So can you help me out with the density of apartments that were the expectation in the special permit? I'm remembering something like 21%.
Yeah, I don't think we ever really focused much on that. I don't recall through the permitting process with the planning board that we focused much. When this bylaw and when this permit was issued, the thought that we could ever have any significant multifamily apartments in this town was foreign. I mean, that's a pretty new development. But I think when we looked at this, or at the Pine Hills, we never envisioned that there'd be a market like that. But, and again, I don't recall it being a focus ever.
Do you have a follow-up?
I do. A couple, actually. For Dan, from Mr. Gorska. Is it safe to assume, well, can you give me an idea of the number of apartments that might be built as affordable vis-a-vis the number of single-family homes in the neighborhoods yet to be built? My memory from the sales office was that the areas that are currently going to be built or currently planned are relatively larger parcels and larger homes. And I wondered if basically we all expected 103 units to be spread around the community. And, how should we reset our expectations?
It's a fair question. I will say it's going to obviously depend going forward on market conditions. But it is important to note, Joe, from a Red Brook perspective, it's always contemplated a large 50-unit affordable assisted living facility. So this is just senior housing rather than assisted living. As far as the mixture type, I'll be honest with you right now, affordable housing, single-family affordable housing is very difficult, not only to construct, but also to find suitable people that are creditworthy with the price points that they're on. So right now, our focus is on a project like this because it offers deep affordability. It offers a demographic that doesn't have a lot of housing here. I would say as a Red Brook resident, and I'm not going to give you very specifics, but I would say a majority of them at this point will be multifamily, some type of multifamily as affordable units. You will get single family and some townhomes that we have going on, but majority of them will be multifamily.
Very good. Do you have a follow-up, Mr. Hutchinson?
I have another question. Can you describe the plan for the building on your master plan from the sales office that's behind the Cranberry Cafe and across Wareham Road from your proposal?
Are you talking about the initial location that we proposed?
Yeah.
Gotcha. I don't know if you guys really, for you folks, Joe's talking about right here. Here's our meeting house right behind it. That's where the original location was proposed, smaller building, well, number of units. So that area is in what we call our village mixed use area. So in the Trevid bylaw, which is the traditional rural village development, which is the zoning bylaw that governs Red Brook, it has a list of allowed uses. Candidly, it could be multifamily, it could be a church, it could be a gas station, it could be a liquor store, it could be a whole host of variety of things. And I would say I would never commit to anything at the moment. It's all going to be dependent on marketability and what's the market bearing, whether it's more multifamily, whether it's, again, a liquor store or a gas station. I can't commit to what it's going to be, but that's why the permit and the bylaw allows flexibility as far as what type of uses, just like our traditional Plymouth bylaw.
Right, but one of the concerns that we all have is parking, traffic, and that building would have an impact on traffic and parking for the entire Village Commons area.
No, I mean, agree. Every house that's built, every commercial space that's built, that adds to it. The master plan itself contemplated up to 60,000 square feet of commercial. It also contemplated 1,200 doors. So those traffic counts were taken into account while that was set, and part of our special permit has biannual traffic monitoring that we do. Any type of use that we would go through there would need to go through planning board, and parking and those requirements will be vetted through that process.
Yeah, so basically, though, there's no plan right now.
Hold on, can I have a point of order? So my question is your line of questioning going on where this building was going to be?
Yes.
So I don't see how that's in the scope of what we're talking about because of where the building is.
It goes to traffic and parking.
But it's nothing it's not part of this article.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I hear what you're saying. Yes, absolutely. If something is constructed there, but that's future and not under the scope of this article. To the chair, but
Yeah, I'm on board with that. Do you have any other questions, Mr. Hutchinson? Very good. Okay, we have one from Mr. McKay. Before you ask, though, I just want to ask one clarifying question.
Sure.
When we talked about that time frame, and you said ideally 5 years.
Yeah.
Okay. This committee has seen time and time again where we've approved articles for a certain dollar amount, and it gets delayed and delayed and delayed, and then they come back and say, hey, we need more money. So can you address that, please?
Sure.
And then
Thank
Mr.
you so
McKay will
much
have
for that
the floor.
question, because my intent with the 5 years was to finish out Red Brook and the remaining affordable commitment, this project. So give you a little bit of timeline. If this is approved on April in town meeting, the Grantham Group has already, candidly, we've already met with the state. We have support shown there as far as they like the project. So if town meeting approves funding, they would then go into a round of cycle with state grant funding. In a perfect scenario, and Walter, correct me if I'm wrong, by the end of this year, they could get state funding for construction then to start in the first or early second quarter of 2025. So this project specifically, the intent is to start within the next 12 to 14 months. The 5 years that I mentioned was the remaining development of Red Brook with the other affordable commitment. So thank you for asking that. I appreciate it.
Very good. Mr. McKay, you have the floor.
I just want to comment on Mr. Brewster's comments, because I have the same issue representing my constituents. And one of the problems I have, I think, is wording. When I talk about affordable housing, they say, yes, we need more affordable housing. And then some of this is not affordable housing per se, but it's more affordable housing. And when you start talking in those terms to people that want a simple answer, you tell them it's affordable housing, and their eyes start to glaze over. So some of the things I think we can do is try to change, as we go along, change the terminology. I don't know what the terminology should be, but I know it's confusing to the people we represent. Because they take the numbers and say, well, we're going to put in $3 million, and we're going to get no more affordable housing. You say, yes, but it's going to be more affordable, but it's not an affordable housing. And then we look at Mr. Veo's proposal, where he wants 900,000, and we get some more affordable housing units, but they're not more affordable housing units.
All right, Mr. McKay, we're going to stick to questions tonight. We're way over on our time. So having said that, do we have any other questions on the chairs? All right, I'm going to open it up to town meeting members, and I see Mr. DiNardo has a question. Correct, Mr. DiNardo?
Well, I just want to make a quick statement.
No, we're not
Town
making
meeting
statements. Nope.
Well, could I just bring up
a
point on this, Madam Chairman?
If you have a question, we're taking questions.
Okay, I'll have to save it for public comment then. Thank you.
Yeah, or actually, feel free to bring it up in the caucuses too. Very good. So we are moving on. 16D.
Okay, Article 16D, referring back to your index, 16D appears on page 94. And here we go on page 16D.
Mr. Cohen, we are way over on our time.
I am going to be...
So I know you're going to be as crisp as possible.
Yeah. Just as soon as the... hang on. Is this one working? I'm sorry. That's what I'm doing. I'm going. Thank you. Just hit the CPA one. Can you go back to the other one, David? The CPA? Right below. Right there, right under yours. Oh, right under Cram.
Me too. Thank you.
Okay, 16D. 16D. And there we go. And this is a recommendation coming from the Department of Energy and Environment, that is DEE, here in the town of Plymouth. David Gould, the director of that office, supplied the committee with an application for $3 million to upgrade our paths and access points from Brewster Gardens along the town brook right into the Jenny Gristmill and over the footbridge to that location at the Jenny Pond. Over the last 25 years, the Department of DEE and the Community Preservation Committee have been working to restore the town brook, whether it's purchasing land along that town brook or taking down obstructions such as fish ladders and other dams and things of that nature, which David's Office of Department of Energy and Environment has been very successful securing grants to help us with that, not only taking down these dams, but also restoring the riverway. The money will cover activities right up to a bypass that, removing the activity around a fish ladder at the Jenny Gristmill, and so where the bypass will pick up the migrating fish. So this has been a long application in waiting. David Gould is here. He's going to take you through his quick presentation. And David Gould. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I will. I assure you, I will be quick. Very briefly, some context into this request. So it's part of a larger scope that the town has been working on for the last several years, and the request has two main components: Jenny Pond footbridge replacement, as well as improvements from the path from behind the Jenny Gristmill to Brewster Gardens. So within that context, as you all know, a few years ago, the town did the Holmes Playground improvements, as well as Newfield Street. We improved a series of sidewalks and paths leading down to Willard Place. Those are now all ADA compliant. In a similar time frame, DPW redid the Jenny Pond parking lot and made those sidewalks ADA compliant. The issue is in between the two walks that lead to the footbridge and the footbridge itself that connect the two areas is not ADA compliant. We're looking to replace that to connect the two parks and make that entire length compliant for folks to traverse. And then, as Bill mentioned, we're working on a bypass project behind the gristmill. This would allow us to continue the work at that project from the end of that project to Brewster Gardens. What we didn't want to do is do an amazing project and then all of a sudden leave a series of walkways in poor condition leading to Brewster Gardens. And I'll show some photographs that detail what I'm speaking about. So this is the area in green that I'm speaking. This is the basketball court and the skate park. Following it in green is leading down to Willard Place, which is this little cul-de-sac. And then you cross over the footbridge into Jenny, and then you can follow this green line all the way down to Brewster Gardens here. So that is the area that we're looking at. This is the current condition of the footbridge at Jenny. Obviously, there's some steps up and down. This is approximately 1970, late 60s, early 70s construction. So this is, approaching 55 years old, especially the piles that are in the water. The path leading to and from the footbridge is also not ADA compliant due to the slope and the grades. And these are some of the walkways underneath Main Street Extension and Market Street. As you go down to Brewster Gardens, you can see the deterioration of the asphalt, the uneven grades, the lack of railings, and obviously some drainage issues there. One of the issues that we have during the winter months, obviously, with the drainage is it freezes. And so anybody who's walked down that area knows that in the winter months, you need to be very, very careful. That area freezes over because of the drainage and then becomes quite slick and dangerous to walk. We also have some deterioration of the retaining walls along the brook leading to the walkways and some conduit that obviously needs to be replaced. We're looking to make those repairs as well as part of this project. And then obviously we also have some sinkholes that we need to replace those paths. So we'll bring up the grades and elevations of those and also put a good even surface as well as railings along those locations. And then some of the work that we'll be doing from the bypass project will continue down to Brewster. These are just some of the concepts and the railings. This is the improved pathway, at least the landscape design that we're looking at. Again, making sure that all the pathways leading to and from the Gristmill to Brewster Gardens are all ADA compliant. We'll do a series of significant drainage improvements to make sure that those drainage issues are resolved and that it doesn't freeze up in the winter months. One of the issues that I think most folks know are those 3 rivulets that are between the mill and heading down to Brewster Gardens. We'll do a small elevated boardwalk over that path so the water will be able to go under that as opposed to over that, ensuring that it's always dry and not freezing in the winter months. So briefly, some of the challenges that we've had and why we're actually making this request. Back in 2019, the town received a park grant to replace the Jenny Pond footbridge. And as you all recall, we had a series of town meeting delays. It kept pushing town meeting back and back. And by the time we finally had a town meeting and we were able to get approval for the grant money to be used, we ran out of time. We returned that grant money. We then rewrote the grant in 2021 and received the grant again, and then put the project out to bid. And in post-COVID economics, it came in 35% over the original budget. We then returned the grant a second time. And so we are looking to just get this project done. And as always, we're still looking for additional funds for all of the work. So we've been putting forth a series of grants for not only the dredging at Jenny, but for the bypass project and all of the additional sidewalks and landscape improvements that will be associated with the dam repairs out there. So we're certainly not looking to CPC to fund all of the work. We have, right now, approximately $13 million in grant applications pending out there. So we're certainly looking to bring in more than our fair share of funding towards the project. And again, just briefly in summary, the footbridge will be approximately 1.3, with the trail work being about 1.6 of that $3 million total. I do have a NOAA funding pending in February 2024 that obviously has come and gone, and now what we're hearing is announcements in late April, early May is what we're hoping for. We've also put in some funding requests for a first-time program that the state has to match some CPA funding for dredging of Jenny Pond, so we're continuing to put out applications to secure as much money as possible. And with that, I'll take any questions if you have any.
Sure. So what's the estimated, I love the dog. What's the estimated amount of grants that you expect to receive in for this?
So with the bypass and some dam repair funding, we're hoping to bring in approximately $11 million, and then potentially another $2 million in dredging, so a total of 13.
Okay. Many of you know I've spent about 8 months in like a wheelchair cart last year. If you remember, I had surgery. So I spent a lot of time trying to still be the mom and down there with my wheelchair cart trying to get over those bridges, and it was a nightmare. But the other problem was there wasn't a lot of handicap parking. Is there any of this that covers handicap parking?
There is not, but we'll be doing some handicap parking in association with what we call the Dark Orchard Trail. So we'll be doing some connection. As you know, we got some environmental affairs funds approved at last town meeting for that project. And when we add sidewalks in the connection in there, there'll be associated handicap parking spaces in locations where that sidewalk will connect. So that'll be part of that project.
Okay, yeah, because it was almost impossible to get over those bridges. I've got Mr. Brewster and then anyone else? Okay, Mr. Brewster.
Excuse me.
So thank you, David. So what's your timeline on this? You know, we approve it in April, and what's your timeline looking?
So the timeline would be that if we are successful, the first thing we need to do is get the dredging done. So if we can succeed in getting the grant funding for the dredging, we would dredge late fall, early winter coming up. And then the dam repairs, the bypass project, and all of these grant improvements would be the following winter. The footbridge would happen with dredging, so that would happen this coming fall and winter.
By next year, next summer, it would be done if, you know, you get everything.
We'll have the dredging. One of the things that we always do anytime we work in Town Brook is we have to work within our time of year windows that we get from the permitting. So we sort of work through the fall and winter and then wait spring and summer, and then we can get back to work in fall and winter again. So if we could work all year round, that would be fantastic. That would move things along, but unfortunately we can't.
Okay, very good. We're moving on. 16E. Thank you, Mr. Thank
You're very welcome.
Thanks. So 16E, these articles are articles that are designed to ask town meeting to reduce the original borrowing authorization that you gave the committee in its earlier recommendations. So Pilgrim Hall is a request to reduce the borrowing authorization. These numbers that we are reducing the borrowing authorization are under the recommendation of the Finance Department. Lynn Barrett's here tonight. One of the reasons that we do this is try to get applications in front of you sooner rather than later so you can make a decision on applications. So this gives us time for us to plan for the eventual invoices coming in for activities associated with the CPA expenditure. So the greater distance we have between the town meeting you authorize the expenditure and the actual invoices coming in, this gives us an opportunity to go to future town meetings. As you see here on 16E, you already approved the money for Pilgrim Hall, but we're coming back and we're reducing the borrowing. The same thing with Stevens Field, we're reducing the borrowing because now that's kind of moved up to priority because we're coming to conclusion at Stevens Field. It'll be done in July. The work is moving ahead, so that moves into a priority. These articles is a way for allowing Lynn Barrett and the Finance Department to avoid any short-term borrowing as long as possible by reducing the borrowing. And you'll see us, if these articles are approved at this town meeting, it's approximately, when it comes to affordable housing, $7,960,000. We will be pacing ourselves with future recommendations to town meeting to buy down that authorization. And that's what you see here under these two articles. And the special town meeting, you'll see Articles 8A, B, and C. They're in your book, not on the presentation tonight, but there's a continuation of that request of authorization to reduce that. Lynn, did you want to add anything to your recommendations on those two?
Go right ahead, please.
I just know there were a lot of questions earlier about all the spending, so I could review that with all of you to let you know sort of the plan.
Let's do that, and then we'll take a question from Mr. Costello.
Okay. As you know, so the annual revenues, I believe those are in your book. In the back, there's sort of a budget on an annual basis. So the CPA fund is estimated to take in about $4 million in fiscal '25, and that's between the surcharge and the state match and other interest, income, or other funds that are within that fund. And the letter, there's a memo of my recommendation of how to use that $4 million. So the $4 million is basically going to be used to, one, fund projects that are ready to go. For example, the housing project on Court Street is already under construction. So between using That's Article 16B. So between using annual revenues of $400,000 plus the existing housing reserve of $558,000, that's what we're going to use for that project. Some of these other projects are not necessarily ready to build right away. So we're going to use the other available funds to pay down existing debt that we have on Stevens Field, that we have on Pilgrim Hall Museum, because those projects, Stevens Field right now is under construction, and then Pilgrim Hall Museum is actually going to start this spring. So their construction season is over the summer and into the fall and into the winter of next year. So we want to sort of pay down on that. And then, so each of these projects are either an authorization to borrow, because it's a project that we're going to be doing in the future, or spending available funds that we have right now. So the authorizations to borrow will be for the Plymouth Area Coalition for the Homeless for $3 million, the Red Brook project for $4 million, and the Town Brook Trail for $3 million. We're going to use available funds to pay down debt on Pilgrim Hall, and also do the 10% set aside. So as a requirement of the CPA fund, you either have to set aside 10% for all three uses, historic, open space, and housing, or you use that 10% towards a project. So the 10% would meet in the appropriate areas. So in this particular case, the 10% for historic we're going to use to pay down the debt. Same thing for Stevens Field. We're going to use the 10% towards open space recreation as the 10% to pay down that. And then 16G, which is the next article, but 16G is basically their annual budget and their annual debt service budget. So there's no set-asides recommended under 16G, but we are recommending 4% for their budget, and then another $113,000 for debt service. And the debt service that we're going to be incurring next year is just interest costs associated with the Stevens Field project, because we're going to have to start to borrow on that project by the end of this fiscal year.
Very good. Mr. Costello and then Mr. Brewster.
I'm sorry, I didn't really hear the answer, but it was the fourth bullet. I was going to ask how much the dollar value of the reduction in borrowing was going to be. So Stevens Field, what would that number be? Still to be asked to be determined by a vote of CPC?
No. So what we're doing, Bill did mention, so there's 3 articles at the special town meeting to reduce borrowing. One is for Stevens Field, one is for Pilgrim Hall, and one is for the Spire. So currently right now, for example, we have $3.2 million outstanding on Stevens Field for remaining to be borrowed. That project was a total of like $5 million. So we've already paid down on that project. We've already paid down debt.
No, I understand. That was going to be my second question. I know we've done this reduction in borrowing several times for Stevens Field.
Yep.
So it's the balance between $5 million and 3.2, so we've reduced it by one.
We've reduced it by almost 1.7 million so far. And then we're going to, at the special, we're going to reduce it by another $562,000.
Okay, so that is the number, 562.
To get it down to 2.7. And then at the annual, we're going to reduce it again by $871,041. So would remain about 1.8 million outstanding in debt there. Pilgrim Hall Museum, the plan is to pay down $733,000 of it at the special, and then the remaining of 2.4 is going to be paid down at the annual.
Ms. Barrett, isn't this all outlined in page 125 in this booklet?
Most of it is, yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So, Alan, take a look at that too. I know we just got our books, so we haven't had a chance.
No, I'm fine. I just needed to know the numbers, but it's good to know where we are with the whole project. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So that concludes.
Mr. Brewster has a question, and then we're going to.
It's probably for Lynn. So if you could talk to me about CPC, and in general terms, how much have we got in CPC, and how much is going out, and how much of this 10.9 million are we borrowing?
Okay, so on an annual basis, the Community Preservation Fund raises in revenue about $4 million.
Right, I got that, how much it raises, but how
Yep.
much have we got?
How much we got is in another page.
Okay.
That is, we have available funds. We have an undesignated fund balance of about almost $1.4 million. And we're using about $1 million of that to pay down debt at the special for Stevens Field and the Spire.
Okay.
Okay, and that'll leave a balance of about $310,000 in the undesignated fund balance.
310.
About 310.
Okay.
And then of the reserve set-asides for community housing, there's $656,831. We plan on using $558,000 of that for Court Street housing, for Article 16B in the annual.
So if you turn to page 121 in your book, you just got your books tonight, but if you look at that section, that's what Lynn is operating from, right there, Lynn, see? So you can walk them through what they have in front of them.
Yeah, so page 12 has the available funds.
Page what?
I'm sorry, page 121.
It's only 10 o'clock, Lynn.
I know, sorry. So there's a reserve for open space of $656,000, and then there's that undesignated fund balance of 1.3. But we are planning to use some of that at the special town meeting and at the annual.
Okay.
Okay? So that's sort of what we have in the bank right now.
Okay.
Okay?
So we've got, after all that, what, $1 million? I'm
400. Well, there'll be $98,000 left in the housing reserve, and there'll be $310,000 left in the undesignated fund balance, for a total
Okay.
of about $408,000.
So we got 408,000, and we're going to spend 10 million, 10.9.
So then the 10. On the second page, on page 123.
Okay.
Okay. At the very end of that memo is just a summary.
Okay, yeah.
So we are going to authorize to borrow $10 million. So that is the $3 million for the coalition, $4 million for Red Brook, and the $3 million for Town Brook Trail.
Okay.
So that's the $10 million.
Okay.
Those three projects.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
I get that. From a standpoint of a budget, I'm just concerned, because I'm looking at, we're looking at 4.4 million that we're going to get in annual revenue. And
So
we're going
the
to borrow
town-
a whole bunch of money.
So the town can borrow short-term
Yeah.
up to 10 years.
Yeah.
Okay? So as these projects get started, when they put a shovel in the ground
Yeah.
and they need money, then that's when the town will start to borrow the money.
Okay.
Okay? And we have up to 10 years to borrow short-term. So we
Yeah, yeah.
would only be paying short-term interest, which that amount would be paid out of their annual budget.
Okay.
Okay? We wouldn't be paying any principal, but we would be going back to town meeting with the next allotment of annual revenues,
Yep.
$4 million,
Yep.
and start paying down
Okay.
on the existing projects and these three projects to try to minimize as much as the borrowing that would have to happen.
Okay.
By statute, by Mass General laws, because these borrowings are deed restrictions in real estate, we have the authority to borrow up to 30 years for it, but we don't want to do that. We want to do it over this shorter time frame, you know, and just pay interest costs on the short-term debt and then pay down on the principal.
Just one last question, and then I'll go back and be more confused. So what what's the budget of the CPC? You know, because what I'm seeing is this is what we've got, but we're going to borrow to create more of a budget.
We're only authorizing to borrow, so you don't actually incur. So, for example, we have not spent one dime on debt service for Stevens Field, okay? But we started authorizing to borrow that project back in 2015.
Right.
So we started that project this year. We're starting to incur those expenses, paying the contractor. So at the end of this fiscal year, I'm going to have to borrow some money just to cover those payments that we made. And we're going to incur interest of about $113,000 in fiscal 25. So we're going to pay that out of next year's budget.
So let me just ask the conversation.
Yep.
Bill comes to you and says, okay, what do we have to spend
So
for
they
CPC?
have available revenues to spend.
Yep.
And then they have, the town has an authorization to borrow up to a certain amount under our
So I'm going to jump
debt
in here.
ceiling.
So wrestling, what I think that you're basically asking, where is the cap? Does the CPC have a cap to say if we get $4 million in, we should only spend we should only spend $4 million. We shouldn't spend over our cap of $4 million. That's what I'm hearing. Is that correct?
So CPC and the town, CPC itself doesn't individually have a cap. For us to be able to do general obligation borrowing, the town has a debt ceiling, and we have to live within that debt ceiling, and we're only about halfway there. We have plenty of room on our debt ceiling. I'm not recommending that we borrow the rest of that debt ceiling in no way, such manner. Am I recommending that? But when they have available projects that they want to do, then we try to come up with some creative ways to be able to fund those projects and then sort of use future available revenues to help pay down on the principal.
Thank you. And it's just, I have to go back to my taxpayers, and they're looking at $10 million. And
Right.
They're saying to
And
me,
they're,
okay.
the 1.5, the CPA charge on their tax bill is not going to go up. It's still going to be the 1.5%, and we're just going to use those revenues that we get to be able to fund these projects.
Yeah. So, and again, this is a yes/no question. We all get to vote on this. So if you're representing your precinct and they're not okay with this, then you know what you need to do.
And all of these borrowings would require a 2/3 vote at town meeting.
Yeah, very good.
Because of borrowing.
All right, we're moving on. Thank you very much.
Yeah. And it's important to note that the committee makes recommendations and tries to get them in front of town meeting as soon as possible so that we build into it a window to allow Lynn to kind of recommend back how best to manage that. We don't like to deny you an opportunity to see an application, but obviously we're terribly aware of that responsibility we have to control that cost. You have your book for your first time tonight. Hope you take a look at it. Lynn will be available to answer further questions, but that concludes our presentation tonight.
It does. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Bill will be attending most of the caucuses as well. So for any residents that are still online, take a look at that caucus schedule, and you can always talk to your precinct members and and these folks here during those caucuses. I know it's super late. Bill and Ms. Barrett, I know that you'd love to stay until the very end, but I'm giving you an exit. You are welcome to say goodnight, and I really appreciate your staying on until the end here. Thank you. All right, we're going into old business. So old and new business. I'm going to be quick, and I'm running through this. I put the dates in here. It's really important that you understand what's happening. So our books are being shipped March 15th. They anticipate we should have them within 4 days after the books are mailed. The motions meeting is scheduled for the 27th at 7:45 a.m. If you want to attend that meeting, reach out to Steve Trifoletti, and he can give you the Zoom details so that you can join. Any single article that has been put before us, there is always an option to do motions for those that don't know. So you can make a motion to amend any of the articles, and then it would be a votable item at town meeting. Town meeting presentation preview. It is scheduled for March 28th at 6 p.m. This is a opportunity that the moderator puts forward where everybody that has an article has a presentation that they're allowed to present to town meeting, and they do take questions at that forum as well. Lots of opportunities to go through these articles. The next COPC meeting was already voted on. We will be regrouping here on March 21st. The agenda is already out. It's published on the public website. There was some questions on whether or not we were going to be getting a budget review from Ms. Barrett and also from the superintendent of schools. They were on the agenda. We have gone in and clarified the agenda, so we will be getting the presentation from the superintendent, so there's no question there. So I want to talk briefly about two different things. I'm not going to go into it in detail because it's 10 o'clock at night. It's something that we're going to be reviewing in not the next meeting, which is the 21st, because if you've looked at that agenda, if you thought tonight was jam solid, next week, 2 weeks from now, it's actually much more intense. We need to make sure we have our wonderful administrative assistant from the COPC support person, Chelsea, who is here, and she is doing a great job. She is our new member here. We have 20 hours of her time a week at the COPC. I want to put some clarification around her role, just so there's no questions. She is supporting the COPC. Did I say CPC? She's supporting the COPC. She is not supporting our caucuses. She is not supporting your laundry service, your doggy walking. She is 100% supportive of what we're doing here on this committee. So it's really important that we keep it under that guise. There are some subcommittees that she's joining meetings on and she's participating in. Legislative oversight, I think, is maybe one of them. So that's all under her remit and things that we want her to be helping us with. So if there's any question on that, please reach out to myself, or you can reach out to the Vice Chair, Matt Tavares. And also, everything that needs to be sent out to all town meeting members. I'm going to say this. I've said this a few times. I'm going to say it one more time, and I want to make sure everyone hears me. It's really important that we don't have any question that we're in violation of open meeting law or that there's a discrepancy in the data that we're sending out. So any content that has to be sent out to all town meeting members or a discussion point that's going to be covered in this meeting comes to you all through the chair or the vice chair. And either one of us are always available. So that means that Chelsea will only send out something to all town meeting members if the chair or the vice chair has approved that. Okay? And so it's critical because we want to make sure that there's not other conflicting information that is people don't know about, other chairs may not know about. So very important. So when we are sending out an email, because this continues to happen, to town meeting or to the members of this committee, does everybody know how to blind copy? Because it's really important. We do not want to initiate debate with this committee. So if you do have a need to send something out, it should really just come from the chair or the vice chair. If for any reason there's a question to that, you can always blind copy, but we don't want to be including all members of this board on any emails that are going out going forward. We're going to cover this in a meeting after Springtown session where we can go over some guidelines that we want to, just ways of working that we're going to talk through. But those are the two things that I want to make sure. I want to now open it up to public comment. And we have a couple people that put their name forward. And Kim is not going to be joining us, but the other lady's name? Mary Ryan. Is she still with us? Oh, good. Ah, oh, welcome.
How about there? Thank you. sorry. This is for Article 16C of the Cranberry Commons project. The taxpayers of Plymouth, as you know, are being asked to fund $4 million from the CPA funds for this project. AD Makepeace could fund this project themselves. As a homeowner in the Redbrook community, I'm subject to the covenants of the Landowners Association. One of those covenants is that if I was going to be selling my home, that I would need to list it with a Redbrook authorized real estate agent. For that sale, AD Makepeace will receive a 1% commission. Should I choose to use another real estate agent, not their designated real estate agent, I'm still responsible for paying that commission. In the past 12 months, there have been 22 resales in Redbrook, which total over $15 million. Now is the time for us to ask Makepeace to be the housing heroes that Plymouth needs. The funds required for the project are more than just, as we've just heard from the financial folks, that the CPA funds revenue received in 1 year. That would mean, as they just indicated, that the funds would need to be borrowed, thereby incurring interest expense. Since this is a project with a private developer, the interest rate would be higher than if it were a municipal project. So additionally, there's another $500,000 that's being requested from the Affordable Housing Trust, money which they currently don't have either. The real cost to this project is actually much more than $4 million. According to Massachusetts state law, at least 10% of each year's CPA funds need to be set aside for each of the 4 primary areas. How do we achieve that when we're spending $10 million against a $4 million kitty? AD Makepeace has an obligation, as we've heard earlier, to build 103 affordable units in Redbrook based on the 2008 special permit. 8 years into the development, or if we take out those first couple of years, at least 5 years into the development, they've now contributed 15 units towards the count of the Town of Plymouth Affordable Housing Inventory. The 2019 Memo of Understanding that modified the 2008 special permit for Redbrook specifies they will construct affordable housing units at the rate of 10% of the market rate units in each 12-month cycle. This has not happened. AD Makepeace has not been forthcoming in providing the how and the when they'll achieve the full 103 units. Tonight was the first time we've actually really heard any commitment or any time frame for that. But at what point does planning and the select board hold AD Makepeace accountable to their obligation? That promise to go above and beyond in the budget with these additional units, we haven't seen the reality of more than 15 units. So it's still, is that a false promise? All of the development in the Redbrook community impacts areas adjacent to Redbrook. South Plymouth areas such as Wareham Road, Bourne Road, Halfway Pond Road, and Long Pond Road. For those of you that have visited our community and live in some of the other parts of town, as we do, we're a car-dependent community. You have to get in your car to go to the grocery store, to go to the pharmacy. We don't have those resources or those amenities in our community. So we don't have any currently regularly scheduled transportation. There is on-call transportation that I'm told from people who've attempted to use it for medical appointments that it is not reliable. We hope that these plans are fully thought through prior to asking taxpayers of Plymouth to contribute funds to this project in the form of CPA funding or the additional funds, financial burden that town departments or services, such as the Center for Active Living or GATRA, might need to add into their budgets. A survey of Redbrook residents was conducted in January. 420 residents, which represented about 42% of our current residents, responded to that survey. In the survey, over 50% of the people who responded took time to write comments. That's how passionate they are and concerned about what's going on. The survey respondents are in favor of affordable housing in Redbrook. That's not what we're worried about. We want affordable housing in our community. But 82% of the survey respondents said they don't want their taxpayer dollars used to support a private developer's affordable housing obligation. We've also heard this evening that there is the traditional rural village development that is the governing aspects of what is built in our community. And I'd like to ask you, in your neighborhoods, if you had a 45-foot building with 62 apartments in it, would that fit in your neighborhood? It might not. And that's the whole point of what the zoning is that we have in town for things like the traditional rural village development. And yet we're being asked to set aside those guidelines, those rules that we have in our town for special projects like this. That's a planning board issue that we'll take up with the planning board, but I'd like you to think about that in the context of your village, in your community, your part of the community, because it's really the same issue.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. So, Mr. DiNardo, I know you wanted to speak in public comment. Can you?
Yes.
I'm exhausted.
I cut to the chase, Madam Chairman. Al Donato, Precinct 17. I live 2 blocks from this project. I was involved with this group in December. A lot of these people now support it since it's been moved. I want to look at the macro real quick. In 20 years, you've done a great job with CPC money. It started in 2001. The very first project was housing. You've had over 106 projects in 20 years, 47 open space, 28 historic, 16 recreational, and the least on the list is housing at 14. Matter of fact, the last 10 years, you've only had 4 projects for housing. So we can't afford to live here, but we put money into recreational. Now, I'm not criticizing this. What I want people to know in closing is, what are we getting? Shall we put up $4 million? Why should we put up the $4 million? Because we're getting that greater buy down. This is like ripping up a 75% coupon in front of Macy's because you hate the corporation. We will get over 20 years, $5.7 million will be enjoyed in that greater subsidy that is not going to be available. So I'm passionate about this because I do not want my fellow colleagues to say, gee, I made a mistake a year from now. You know, it's $2,400 a month for rent versus, according to Harry Helm, as low as $500 or $200 a month. So that's what we're throwing away. The question is, shall we put up $4 million? All these other issues, the mitigation issues, I agree. That's site plan review. That's planning board. I led the charge on the water issues last summer. So we know that. Those issues need to be quelled. But before you is this $4 million. We're crazy not to put up this $4 million because this subsidy goes on forever. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. DiNardo. All right, is there any other public comment?
Yes, there is.
Mr. Lynch, please be respectful. Go right ahead.
I try to be as respectful as possible. And when I was told by a town official that a number of 580 in-law apartments now has been changed to 540, and I try to point out the difference between those numbers, of course, dare I say, I was shut down. Now, may I also point out the fact is that I was trying to go and ask some pointed questions, such as, will the accessory dwelling units add to the density of the town? And I was hoping he would just give simple answers, but I was cut off. So yes, we'll add to the density. Yes, we'll add to the increased burden of the town's infrastructure. Will the accessory dwelling unit tax increase offset the cost of the increased burden to the town's infrastructure? The answer would be no. And I appreciate Mr. Costello's previous questions, and this is my concern. I am in a single-family residential neighborhood. Now, would a multifamily house be moved in there? Could the original owner move into the accessory dwelling unit and have the primary dwelling unit be occupied by a family with 3 children? Yes. What would then happen? It would increase the cost to the town to educate those children, $600,000 over a 10-year time period. Could we recoup that in taxes from the actual accessory dwelling unit? No, we couldn't. So I ask that you would consider very strongly, ladies and gentlemen, is accessory dwelling units, I am not opposed to having what I would call family dwelling units for the children of the actual homeowner. So consider that, and I will be asking those questions throughout the caucuses as they occur.
Thank you, Mr.
very
Lynch.
much for
Very,
allowing
very
me
good.
to
Have a
thank you
wonderful
very
night,
much
everybody.
for allowing me to talk and express
Mr.
my thoughts
We're moving on,
without
Mr. Lynch.
being
Mr.
interrupted.
Motion to
Appreciate it.
adjourn.
Have a good
All
night.
those in favor? Aye, very good. Everybody drive home safe. Thanks for all the participation. Really appreciate you coming out tonight. And let's have a real healthy debate for caucuses. Good night.